Mech pilots, online. BattleTech manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech podcast.
In our 16th deployment of BungleTech, my spheroid co-host Michael and I are joined by Constantin from Hired Steel. As we talk about a lot. We also share some interesting clarifications from our last episode in our extraordinary Proclamation segment. Reflect on the classic BattleTech mistakes Hired Steel's pilots were making on the battlefield. And read The Great UrbanMech Uprising written by Eric Salzman. Plug in those neurohelmets, MechWarriors, cause we're initiating a tactical information download.
Bonus objective. Extraordinary Proclamation. Initiating.
Before today's episode starts, we wanted to quickly welcome our newest patrons, as well as provide some additional context to our favorite flavor text observations in our last episode. Firstly, a big welcome to our newest clan fellows, Technician Gus, Technician Ryan Fletcher, and Technician Seth WhiteFox. Be honored to be given your first commands directly from our con.
Technician Gus, get to work on that salvage Giuliano and Hanger Venom. The battle is soon to come. Technician Ryan, meet me in my quarters immediately. I must hear the story of how one of the Technician cast has earned the Fletcher blood name. And Technician Seth, I expect you in the briefing room at 0630. Your intelligence regarding the various despicable Intersphere mercenary factions will certainly be a boon to our cause.
Secondly, let's chat about some additional insights we were given regarding a few flavor text highlights discussed last episode, coming straight from the Viper's maw of Keith Hahn. Hey, who broke my large pulse laser's TARCOM interface? You may remember this flavor text from when we were discussing the pulse laser. It turns out what this flavor text was originally intended to reference was the change made upon the release of Total Warfare that made aimed or called shots with targeting computers no longer possible with pulse lasers or ultra or rotary ACs firing more than one round. This change is the break the pilot in the flavor text was referencing. Also, if you recall us discussing the line, "Nothing says lovin' like a face full of mech-scale buckshot," LBX flavor text. Well, it turns out this is a reference to the Pillsbury slogan originally from the 1950s that was used by the company. Nothing says lovin' like something from the oven. Here is one of the old commercials to jog your memory.
Hi, I'm Poppin' Fresh, the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Hi.
Out of cookies? Let's make some.
Nothing says lovin' like something from the oven.
And Pillsbury says it best.
To honor the intention of this flavor text and instill it in the memory of generations to come, Michael and I BattleTeched the commercial a bit. Give it a quick listen. And this is where our commercial was supposed to play, but unfortunately this episode we ran out of time. But don't worry, next episode, it'll be there. Get hyped. Well, with that out of the way, and with the presumed blessings of our honorable and effervescent Loremasters MagnumDanger and RetroLazer to continue, Selah. Let's get this episode on the tarmac.
This is Professor Michael for Your Sphere Today. The critically acclaimed holodrama Hired Steel was cast in a new light this month after one of the producers, Constantin, revealed the story was based on his time serving in an unnamed mercenary company. Despite the Trivid studio TMC denying any relations to real-world events, treasure hunters and Tridio aficionados have been rushing to the rim world of Ironland, believing it to be home to a Star League-era facility as shown in the Tridio climax. No such discoveries have been announced, but several small skirmishes are already being investigated by the MRB. Now on to more of Your Sphere Today.
Primary objective, podcast topic segment, initiating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of the BungleTech podcast. Today's pretty exciting, and I'm once again joined by my best buddy, my best pal, my favorite co-host, the sensual Michael. Say hello, Michael.
I'm your only co-host. You're stuck with me.
This is very true. I'm also lucky and fortunate enough to be joined by the amazing master of CGI disaster, Constantin from Hired Steel. Hello, Constantin.
Hello. You are way too friendly.
Well, I'm going to be friendly for the length of this conversation because we are diving deep into your brain, good sir. And I found that the best way to get those juicy little tidbits is through being friendly. It is the Canadian way, eh? So everybody, today we're here to talk to Constantin about Hired Steel and his experience in the BattleTech community creating CGI animations. And I am really stoked. Before I start, I just wanted to mention that there are a few other interviews out there with Constantin and Hired Steel that I really recommend you see. And our episode is actually built on the foundation of these interviews. So this episode should seem complementary in its nature. Specifically, you can check out the episode done by No Guts, No Galaxy and Renegade HPG. Some really good information there. And I will link those interviews in our episode description in case you just can't get enough Constantin. Constantin, who the heck are you, man? Imagine I don't know who you are. Please enlighten our audience.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the like I said, way too friendly introduction. My name is Constantin. I am 27 years old. I'm from Germany, and I used to do CG and CGI professionally, and now I do it as a hobby, and that is what you see online.
Very cool. And one of the forms we see it is Hired Steel.
Yeah.
What the heck is Hired Steel, Constantin?
Hired Steel is our interpretation of what we would have liked to see on YouTube about MechWarriors and BattleTech, actually. And we just noticed that there wasn't anything like that around. So we sat down and just did it ourselves, basically. So it's a story about a mercenary lands on a very remote planet outside the area of the big houses, discovering an old SLDF weapons cache or depot, and the story that ensues. Because they realize they are not alone.
Aha. Are any of us ever really alone, Constantin?
Not in the way that they are not alone, because I hope you're not being visited by space pirates at night. So.
Oh, man. I'm going to totally dream about space pirates tonight.
What was your sort of role getting the project started?
I wanted to say this during the introduction, but this is like a big team effort. Literally, none of this would be online if it wasn't for the team. For example, I can't animate at all, so I'm really dependent on my team member Bernard, for example, for that. So it is a team effort, but my role, I guess, dreaming it all up, starting it in April 2020 in my living room when I was super bored because of COVID lockdowns. And since then, I've done pretty much anything. I've done effects, I've done environment art, I've done lighting, I've done composition, I've done some directing, I'm doing the editing, I've done some audio, I'm not doing that anymore. So yeah, pretty much everything, actually.
I guess that's part of being on a relatively small team working on this.
Yeah, it's all shared. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me correct, I'm not doing everything, I'm just doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that crops up, I just get out of the way.
So you were the seed of the idea that led to the role anything on the project.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
Okay. So you used to play competitively in MechWarrior Online, and I know that was some of the start of your videos. You used to make some videos for the different, not factions, but for the different
units. Yeah.
Units, yeah. Was this your start in BattleTech, or do you have a different origin story?
So my origin story, so you have to put competitively in quotation marks. We I think at my height, I trained like two or three times a week using TeamSpeak back then. And back when we still had to do sync drops because MechWarrior Online didn't allow like lances over 8, I think, or over 4. I don't recall it anymore. Just to get the whole team into one match.
Mm-hmm.
But my origin story was basically, I think I've never been a console gamer. I've always been a PC gamer because my dad actually studied IT and was one of the first like actual programmers back when programming still meant like reading code from a printed magazine and putting it into your whatever. Like one of the first games I think that I played in my life was MechWarrior 3 on a very old big boxy 4x3 screen together with I think Age of Empires 1 or 2, but MechWarrior 3 was always like one of my first memories with PC gaming, probably. And then I also tried MechWarrior 2, but MechWarrior 3 was obviously a different beast. And I still remember that game. And then when I got a little bit older and MechWarrior 4 came, well, I think that was already out by then, but I really played that and understood a lot more and built my own mechs and really spent a lot of time in that game. And then I think 2011 or 2012, when MechWarrior Online came around and I was just getting out of school, getting into university, I obviously had a lot of time on my hands. So I spent a lot of time in that. So that's where I come from.
So the MechWarrior 3 first game is really interesting to me. And you said it's one of your first games. So would you remember your first 3 games? I'm trying to like visualize the gaming formation. What sprouted your gaming interests, or what was your first introduction that shaped you? Are there a few other games that come to mind?
So, I mean, at that stage, so I, for example, have very vivid memories of playing Age of Empires 2 with my dad. And we had 2 computers in the house, one in the basement and one in the attic, basically. And back then, our only method of communication that I could think of was calling my dad with the internal house telephone function. So I called him and he picked it up on his office phone in the attic. And then we talked over that while we played Age of Empires 2 against AI, basically. So that was the old Age of Empires 2 version that you can't install anymore because it's not compatible with modern computers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But so MechWarrior 3, Age of Empires 2, and then that was obviously a bit later when I had my first own computer. I think what very much influenced me was Need for Speed Underground and Underground 2. And probably can't comment on that too much, how I got the CDs, because I was given the game, let's put it that way, and then played that a lot, and Stronghold Crusader, I think. So a lot of like simulation games and stuff. So that has been a red line through the whole gaming career. Yeah.
Interesting. Very, very, very cool, man. I get such a warm feeling when I visualize you and your dad playing, dialing up on the phone. He's in the attic, you're downstairs. I just had, like, my son is 1.5 years right now. And I visualize the time in the future where we might actually interact with each other on a shared hobby. And man, to have a memory like that with my child, I think would be so special. So you're warming my heart. I'm gonna start crying.
Yeah, that's been a pretty big influence, and I think my dad was a huge influence on me. Anyways, so props to him. I mean, my mother as well, but in other ways. But let's not get into his family history.
Shout out to Constantine's mom and dad.
Yeah, and it's super neat to, because we've talked to quite a few different people, usually end up asking sort of the same type of question about like, how did you end up in the hobby? Because we've always thought that like BattleTech, it's got a really diverse community.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different types of media and so many people that come into it from so many different directions. So yeah. I think you're sort of the first that we've talked to that like mostly got in through the video games, almost entirely through the video games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of similar in that I'm mostly like a computer gamer, and I knew a little bit about BattleTech and later fell into the like tabletop side of things. So that's super cool. There's all sorts of different people like big stompy robots for different reasons.
Yeah, my dad also had the old German prints and old German translations of the books laying around.
Okay.
So later, when I started reading a lot, apart from like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and the usual stuff, I also read through a lot of I think my first book was some random Dark Age book about some ugly mech or something like that. BattleTech has a big community in Germany. I think one of the biggest outside of America. And like we even have our own names for the mechs and stuff. So German translations. I think the licensee on the German part back then was very active. So that's how it was spawned in Germany.
Awesome.
It's funny, we were talking to BattlePod about this. We did an interview with all the different BattleTech podcasts out there, and BattlePod's a big German podcast. And they were like saying how there's interesting translation difficulties. Like, I don't know the German word, but like L-laser in German would be small laser. Like, what's the word for small in German?
It's klein or leicht. And so you have L-laser, and on the other way around you have schwerer laser. So that would be an S. So it's actually like just completely turned on its head. So yeah.
That's something future we're going to go into in BungleTech, but we're going to really look at how BattleTech culturally is different across different regions. Because I think that these little subtle changes that really I find just interesting choices that make it unique and applicable to different areas. And I've always found it very interesting, specifically with the different faction types and the sort of stereotypes that they represent. And you have, the Steiners and their Germany and what they represent, and like how is that taken by people that are Germans? Because, then you have the Davians, who sort of, using air quotes here, but the Americans or North Americans, and they were always like shown as heroic and stuff like that at the beginning. So it was pretty cheesy. And the cultural stereotypes sort of, over time they grew and matured a lot. But I always found it's just interesting to me how different cultures would react to their, essentially like, I'm in Japan, I'm a BattleTech player. Oh, Kiritas are villains, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a perfect side note about this that actually caused, like, I think one of the biggest errors that we did in Hired Steel, but I'm gonna save that for later because that is exactly because of this what you just mentioned.
Ho! Excited.
So maybe on the other side of your interests, what got you into CGI? You said you used to do that professionally. Now you do it as a hobby. What sort of brought you? What made you want to do that?
I think, very honestly, MechWarrior. My background is this. I did a lot of gaming in school, obviously, way more than I have time for now. But I've always been a very active gamer, and obviously the MechWarrior Online time has really influenced me. I've also played other games quite competitively, like DayZ or War Thunder and stuff. But I think probably the most hours, probably around like 2,500 or something like that, have been spent in MechWarrior Online. When I did my A-levels, so I finished like, I guess you could say, high school in Germany. And it was time for me to pick a degree that I want to study in university. I came up with the crazy idea that I want to do 3D animation professionally, because we have had our YouTube channel since 2012. And I've done this unit promo videos with my team back then already. And we quickly reached a point where, especially back then, where you didn't have like the camera functions and stuff in MechWarrior Online, we reached the limits of what we can do with like simple in-game recordings. So my good friend Andreas back then actually was the one who was like, okay, then let's just do our own animations. And he booted up Blender, which was also a very much more simple program back then, and just started pumping out like the first rendered images of like mechs that we extracted from MechWarrior Online and stuff. And I was super confused back then because I really didn't understand anything except very simple video editing that I did for school projects and stuff. I always found it interesting. I've always liked movies and video games and stuff, but that is why I started looking into, well, first video editing, then After Effects, so like image, VFX, green screen stuff, and then 3D stuff, compositing for 3D stuff. And that aligned time-wise very well with my A-levels. And I was like, okay, well, this is my biggest interest. This is my biggest hobby. This is what I am actually passionate to do. So let's do 3D animation professionally. I knew back then already that you could do this as a career, that you could work in like Marvel movies and stuff, and that they have these huge cohorts of 400 artists that work on these movies for like 3 years. Avatar was a very big influence back then from James Cameron, because that revolutionized the 3D animation scene, basically. And back then, in Germany at least, it was still so niche that I could only study privately. So I had to get a bank loan for my studies, which is something very unusual for Germany. Because usually studying in Germany is almost free, except like 250 euros for like your train ticket.
Yeah.
And that was something very unusually. I moved out with 18 to a big city. I came from a very rural area, and then I started doing 3D. And then I got into the advertisement industry and spent about 5 years there. And then I quit that. And that's where I'm now, basically.
And now you're doing sort of what you set out to. You wanted to see videos of cool, stompy robots, and now you're making those videos that you always wanted to see.
We've been consistent enough that we are lucky enough to now work with a company that makes these games, actually. And that is, I think, pretty much a childhood dream come true, because a big influence on me was the intro that you can see when you are booting up MechWarrior 3 for the first time, where the clan forces like fall into the city. And I vividly remember the scene of, because I was way too young for that, of this guy who gets stomped by the summoner and screams as the foot hits him. And that has been like burned into my head. And now we can do like similar stuff that people might see when they play the new game, because like now I can talk about it. Now it's announced. Like we are doing some stuff with CGI on MechWarrior 5 clans, and that's super cool, like beyond anything that I could ever wish for. So very happy to do the big 27-year circle and come around where I started, basically. Yeah.
You're closing the loop.
Yeah, exactly.
Your life has a perfect arc.
It's not over yet, man. Don't close the loop yet.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah.
On that topic, so what is your favorite CGI animation out there? And is it a 3-second clip-on loop of a summoner stomping on an infantry person? I remember that scene too, by the way. Like it's very yeah, it's a good scene.
Yeah, exactly. And now I have prints of the summoner, the vulture, and the timberwolf on my wall in IKEA frames. So you have to be very careful with like the terminology. CGI implies that you are talking about like a fully 3D rendered scene. And I think we get so much of that people, like CGI in the past few years has gotten even sort of a bad reputation because it's been so overdone, and you only notice it when it's bad. I can really highly recommend a video of, I think, Freddie Wong. It's called Why CGI Sucks, because it doesn't, or something like that, which is from an artist sharing his frustration about this, because like the overdoneness of the Marvel movies in the past years have led directors like Christopher Nolan saying there's no CGI in Oppenheimer, when Oppenheimer is like, I think, 2,600 VFX shots. So the movie literally wouldn't be possible without an army of artists. So CGI, this is a big tangent. CGI, you only notice it when it's bad. You don't when it's not bad. So I think to answer your question, honestly, I think what George Lucas did with the original Star Wars movies, even though it's not CGI or just in part, is literally historical. And what the guys did at ILM back then with like kit bashing little plastic models and blowing them up in front of a blue screen and stuff, considering the technical means that they had back then, is absolutely mind-blowing. And many people would struggle to recreate something like that even today with all the tools that we have. So like probably I think the moment when you boot up the very first Star Wars movie, so episode 4 by now, and you see the Star Destroyer coming in over your head, because that is literally like a small plastic model.
What I'm getting is that for you, CGI isn't like it's not a goal, the fact that it's it's a tool, and the thing that you feel when you watch it, that's way more important than the details of whether it was CGI or VFX or miniatures.
Absolutely. Yep. And this is also, right now we have this big AI debate, like is AI gonna replace artists? Is AI gonna replace voice actors? Is AI gonna replace blah blah blah? AI is gonna end up being a tool, and if you just put a prompt into something and it doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have consistency, it doesn't have a story. Humans like work on story. So you need to have that, and you need to have a thought out story behind anything.
And that's something I really loved watching Hired Steel is you do sort of have that story running through it. A lot of YouTube is chock full of little videos of people flexing their CGI, VFX, visual muscles. But, Hired Steel actually has a running thread through it and actually makes it really compelling. Aside from the fact that it looks really good, there's that story you can grab onto.
And I mean, we are aware that, for example, the character work that we started doing in episode 1 is not, it's like in the middle of Uncanny Valley and looks like super plasticky and stuff. But we actually talked about, like, should we do actual recordings with actual actors for the cockpit shots? And we watched a few of like student projects that try to do that for BattleTech and other projects. And the problem is that you have to put a lot of effort and a lot of budget into this, and you have to get a really good actor. Otherwise, it's going to end up looking super ridiculous. Because then you have like cardboard helmets and like an actor that's like, I am getting shot from factor 5.3. And it's gonna look like just ridiculous. So we ended up skipping that just because we have a budget of a few hundred euros, and you can't even get an actor for that. Let alone the props, and our technical skills back then weren't good enough to get like full facial motion capturing or whatever. So we've been slowly inching towards that. But I would love to work with real actors, of course, and I would love to work with like real facial emotion, and I would love to work with like some more in-depth dialogue, but you can only put so much story into like 2 minutes 30 without ending up overdrawing it.
So I want to get deep into your soul, into your heart with this next question, Constantin. Yeah, go deep.
Uh-oh.
You are allowed to cry on our podcast if you want to, just so you know. We don't edit out crying. We just edit out swears. So don't swear and cry.
Yeah, I will try my best.
So I want to know, you've explained your origin story from that playing the game, being introduced to MechWarrior 3 and your evolution as a gamer. But I want to know why BattleTech. I want to know what about BattleTech resonated with your heart that made you have this passion that you've just carried through the length of the circle that is almost at its end, supposedly.
I hope not.
Close the loop, Constantine.
Make us whole, I said. That's a good question, and I've talked about this with my, well, I have to say fiance now, which is still kind of weird. But
congratulations! How new?
Yeah, thank
you.
Thank you. Since Christmas, basically.
Oh wow! So 3 months in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like she's a big part of the reason we include the thank you to our girlfriends, wives, and family at the end of each Hired Steel episode, because we spent a big chunk of our free time on this project, and you could spend that barbecuing or whatever, but we choose to spend it babysitting crashing software. So. What was the question again? No.
Why BattleTech?
What about it resonated with you? And I know it's hard. You started thinking about your fiance, how much you love her. You got distracted. You can let her listen to this clip, so she'll realize how much you love her, because truly that's the only thing that could pull you away from your love of BattleTech.
Why I said that is because I've talked about it with her, and I mean, I guess so. For example, I have a problem with the new Star Wars movies, for reasons that like we don't have to discuss right now, but I just don't like them, and I just don't like what Disney did with the franchise, because it feels like they're bleeding it out creatively and just turning it. And I know that an intellectual property is like a money-making machine and stuff, but you just can't have it look like it is. And with BattleTech, it always felt very sincere, I guess, even though there are companies trying to make money on BattleTech, and that's super fine. But everything just felt so true. And BattleTech has a lot of awkward art and a lot of weird stories and a lot of stuff that just really isn't super fleshed out, or stuff that has been forgotten for 25 years. And if you're looking at the old concept arts of the old mechs, that they look super weird and stuff, but it's also endearing and somehow cool. And I guess for me it always felt good because it includes elements of like Japanese mecha stuff, but without the Japanese touch to it. So it's not like stuff flying around having wings and everything exploding in your face. It feels very Western for that. It includes a lot of actual like military stuff that I'm also into. So you have companies like Boeing or Krupp still being around in the BattleTech universe. Everything feels like a quote unquote logical continuation of 20th century combat. And yeah, I think the combination of the community, of the smallness, of the truthness of it all, combined with the feeling of the games and also of the books, that everything just feels very grounded in reality, even though like walking tanks make absolutely no sense.
Yeah, that was something that like when we asked Tex a similar question, he gave a similar answer about like sort of the groundedness, that it feels like a real world. There's obviously a lot of differences. This is a universe where walking robots, walking mechs make sense, and ours, they don't. But it in that universe, it all feels real. It all feels grounded.
Yeah, and it somehow feels sincere, and it somehow feels, you feel how passionate people are about like actually painting these super tiny small models. I couldn't do that. People that care enough about it to like meet up and have these cool games. People care enough about it to meet 3 times a week to practice playing the game competitively.
Machines are cool. They're interesting machines, devices, and that's sort of what's at the heart of BattleTech, is these really cool machines.
If you look at Hired Steel, we try to get that in. So we have the combined arms aspect that we find is super lacking sometimes, and it's not being illuminated enough. In the books, they always talk about mechs being like a rare occasion and being like 300-year-old relics, basically. So I would imagine that most of the fights are being carried out like they are today, in a tank, in an infantry fighting vehicle, with infantry shooting at each other. So that's what we try to show. And the mechs themselves, we gave them smoke launchers, we gave them a chaff launcher, we gave them spotlights, we gave them an anti-missile system. So stuff that is around literally right now. So why shouldn't it be around then? Because smoke still occludes everything, even though you are 1,000 years ahead.
Yeah, no, I loved a ton of those like touches. The first shot there with the the drone doing recon. I love that. I love the little ERA packs stuck to the hunchback.
That is a weird kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, because I think we did that. And then a few months ago, I saw a meme from someone comparing like the hunchback from Hired Steel to one of these Ukrainian Leopard tanks that they got, where they just stuck on the ERA. And like the ERA blocks, the Contact 1 from the Soviet Union, are literally the inspiration for the Hunchback pilot.
So on the topic of Hired Steel, in previous interviews, you've mentioned how Hired Steel started as a COVID baby. And since then, many people have joined the team along the way. You mentioned this is a big team effort. When you have a big creative endeavor like this and more people are coming in, things will inherently change in the team because you're adding change into the mix. How has the vision of the production changed across time?
When I started doing this professionally, one of my biggest questions that I always asked my team leads or supervisors or whatever was always like, how do you get a scene looking consistently when you have a team working on it? Like how how does it work? I couldn't imagine putting like 4 painters doing an oil painting at the same canvas. That literally wouldn't work. So we are kind of facing the same issues, because if you have a team of like 2 people, one can do the animation and one can do the rendering, basically, and you never get in each other's way. When you have a team of 9, everything looks very different. And we have a team of 9. We are facing logistical challenges. We have people in San Francisco, and we have people in Australia, and we have people in Europe. That is also just literally a time problem. Getting time face to face with the people in Australia is very hard, because they are literally on the other side of the planet. And the second challenge is technical. When you are working, because we have now switched to the Unreal Engine, and that is a very different beast in terms of just how it's set up with folder structure and how the program works. We had to move to like a version control software. So we use GitHub, we use Anchor Point now, like actual stuff that you can push a commit to, so stuff that a software developer would use. Because you need to have some kind of version control when 2 people are working in the same file. And since the Unreal project is basically just a collection of many files, in order to enable multiple people working on it at the same time, and we had big issues with that in the first month. I had a lot of very frustrating evenings going through commits and bugs with Burnout, and I had to redo stuff many times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably user error, but you wonder as you get into these things, because the amount of people who've done that before gets smaller and smaller, and at some point you are literally looking at forum posts with like one answer, or like a video tutorial from some hero in India who explains you this problem with like 70 views.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And the third problem is obviously the creative one. Hired Steel started out, like you said, as I would say an experiment, and then it turned into a demo, and then it turned into a tech demo, and then it turned into the pilot that we did. And I have no idea about storytelling. I've never done it professionally. I've been at movie sets and stuff, but I've never like written a good script myself. A lot of the stuff that has happened in Hired Steel so far and is happening in episode 4 is like retconned into there just to make it work, because it literally just started out as like, oh, let me see if I can texture these mechs in 8K resolution. And that's not really a story in there.
I mean, I was just looking, and like it's almost 3 years since the episode 1, and even more since the pilot. So like, you know, there's a long time here that you've been developing your skills, yes. You've been developing your vision, the team's been changing, the people on the team have been, you know, evolving.
And it's still developing. When I first booted up Unreal Engine, I felt like total noob again. And you always have that if you start with new software.
I also felt that when I opened up Unreal Engine 5 for the first time.
Yeah. I think the biggest one of these was when I opened Side Effects Houdini for the first time. Because the program literally doesn't do anything if you don't understand it. If you talk with people from the industry and you mention Houdini, you always get like a little smile, because the learning curve is a wall, and you have to get over that to just start using it. But when you can finally use it, it is probably the most powerful CG software there is.
So a question I'm really curious about is why and how you chose the Hired Steel Lance mechs, both the pirates and the friendlies. So let's just do a recap of what you have. In the friendlies, you have a hunchback, a catapult, a rifleman, and a Shadowhawk. Shadowhawk? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then in the opposing, you have a Locust, the best mech ever, a Thunderbolt, and a Trebuchet that we've just seen a sort of a teaser of the Trebuchet, I believe.
And more.
Oh, and more.
I'm not spoiling anything. If you look at the ending of episode 3 and the door opens, you see a pair of legs.
I saw lots of discussion in the comments for that video about what the next mech is. Everyone's on the edge of their seat.
Interesting. Yes. I thought that was the Trebuchet. I thought that was a Trebuchet. No, the door opened, the Trebuchet. Oh, did we see legs?
The Trebuchet comes out, and then the Trebuchet comes out, and then on the right side you see a pair of legs.
Oh, I bet you it's a hoplite.
Summoner. It's a summoner, and it's going to stand up and it's just going to squash one of those people in the base.
The first thing it does, it just starts walking around killing the infantry. We're like, this doesn't make any sense. And then we find out the origin story of Constantin. We understand.
I feel like we've put enough clues into episode 3 to know at least one of the coming mechs, and it's being so funny seeing all the comments like, "Oh, you're using this famous Kerensky quote, and then there's no Atlas," and I'm like, guys, do you really think we are that stupid?
Watch the video; the clues are there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the mechs. Why you chose them? I want to know why you chose the mechs, and I also want to know why different mechs were given to the pirates and the specific mechs were given to the friendly mercenary lance.
So obviously our mercenaries are very, very well equipped. So well that they in fact have like weapons that are at the concept level at that time of the universe. And what was obvious to me was that I wanted to have different roles for each pilot. And we wanted to give each pilot like some kind of personality. So the rifleman is the sniper. He's like the guy with the German accent, standing back, sniping his Gauss rifle and his UAC, or his RAC, sorry. And then we have our artillery support, basically the catapult pilot with lots of missiles and some smoke launching equipment, because you like to do that when you are in an artillery. We have our hunchback pilot She's very aggressive. She's very storming forward. She has these claws, so she's like super aggressive. She has like explosive reactive armor, which is, if you need to put that on, you are not standing back, basically. She has this additional stuff on her mech to just get out of the range of like super close-up ranges. And then we have our Lance lead in the Shadowhawk, which is a very versatile mech that I imagine to be a good command mech, basically. I definitely wanted to keep the tonnage down because back then in MechWarrior Online, and I feel also in the other MechWarrior games, it's very hard to incentivize people to not take the 100-ton assault mech because you can just put the most weapons into that. And somehow it makes sense. But in a really good game or a really good environment, you would have a viable strategy for each class, down to the flea mech with like, how many tons? 15 tons, I think.
20 would be the
20?
lowest. Yeah,
20. That is why we chose that.
Yeah. I definitely felt watching it that the mechs, it felt like good selections for all the mechs. They all made sense in the universe. They might not have been optimal picks in MechWarrior Online or in tabletop or whatever,
Definitely
but
not,
like
yeah.
it totally made sense. You know, they were all, everyone had a role to fill.
Now, what about the pirates?
Well, the pirates, I'm lucky enough to have like Charlie in my team, who's like super into BattleTech lore and all the tabletop stuff. So he thought up this pirate faction, which has a very interesting background. So both of these units have like a pretty big background. The mercenaries are backed by the LIC. It's basically the secret service of the Lorian Commonwealth. In the first episode, you see in the command vehicle, you see some markings and stuff, and you can also see them on the drone. So they have a very, very wealthy backing. They are not your usual run-of-the-mill mercenaries. They're basically what you could call an elite force, basically. And the pirates as well. I mean, they have a pretty crazy background. I mean, one of the pirates said, for Amara's sake, they are very well equipped as well. And the mechs they have, the Thunderbolts. I mean, the Locust was a good choice for the scout role. And I just really loved what Alex Iglesias from PGI did with the Locust design and got it into the 21st century. So I really loved the looks of that PGI mech. And the Thunderbolt as well. I always found that super good looking, and I felt that was very fitting for this kind of brutish pirate. You could probably, if you watch Dune, you could probably compare that to like the Harkonnen and the way that they do things. And the Trebuchet, like we needed a good missile mech who was able to shoot from cover.
Yeah, I think that again, like all the mechs sort of make sense, you know, and it's a bit of it's maybe a little bit more like a hodgepodge on the pirate side. It doesn't seem quite as like unified. And I think that fits for the pirate of like, you know, they have very different needs than the mercenary lance does.
Yeah, we did some kit bashing pass on all mechs, and like we gave the mercenaries some kind of special tactical equipment, like I already mentioned, the smoke launchers and the ERA and stuff. We also gave the pirates like some piratey equipment. So they have like spikes, they have extra actuators, they have, for example, the Thunderbolt has some kind of carrying stuff that you would find at the back of a tank, you know, to put some supplies in the sleeping bag into it. Yeah, so very, very patched together, mismatching armor. In the cockpit view of the Locust, you see some duct tape and stuff. So I mean, these guys are pirates, and even the mechs from the houses are like 300 years old. So yeah, I guess at that point, the pirate mechs have a lot of rust on them.
So of the mechs that you have so far that we've seen, do you have one? No, actually, you do have one. I will force you to choose. What is your favorite mech of the ones that you have portrayed so far?
You have to put the disclaimer in because I think just art-wise, my favorite mech wouldn't be one of those that we have portrayed already. Just because we have evolved so much as a team that we are now doing our own mech modeling and our own mech texturing, and that ended up looking so good that it just blew everything else out of the water. But from the ones that we have portrayed so far, I have to say it's probably the Catapult. Catapult has always been my favorite inner sphere mech, just because it just makes so much sense with the way that it has these missile boxes going on.
Yeah, Catapult's so iconic. Like it's such a BattleTech battle mech.
It's one half of the most famous battle mech at all, the Met. cat.
Yeah.
Excuse me, we call it a timber wolf on this podcast. The clan name. This is a clanner-centric podcast.
It is
just
not
so you
a
know, or at least I
clanner-centric
am.
podcast.
Yeah, we fight about it, but I just edit out his dissent.
Yeah, I'm definitely also on the free birth side, I would say.
Oh God,
you're outnumbered, clanner.
Okay, I'm just gonna end this recording now, and okay. So on that, so the catapult, is definitely iconic. Great mech. Let's enhance the question a little bit. You are in the universe. You have to pilot one of those mechs in Hired Steel. Which mech do you pilot? Is it still the catapult?
No, that's that would get me killed pretty quickly, I think. Just because carrying around many tons of literally rocket propellant next to your cockpit is probably not a good idea. And he got very lucky with that RPG shot. That could have been very bad.
Yeah, I wonder if he can still shoot with a launcher. Probably not, eh?
Well, let's see. I would probably say the Shadowhawk, just because it's so versatile. It has everything it needs. It has jump jets. It has a ballistic weapon. It has missiles. It has lasers. It can pretty much fulfill any task. It is a little bit big, so it has a pretty high silhouette. But it's that is why it's the command mech.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so enhancing the question, you are our commander of Michael and I. You've a lance of 3. You're in the Shadowhawk, which I always want to call a Shadowcat. I don't know why.
That is a very different beast.
That is a very different beast of a mech, yeah. What mech do you put Michael in? What mech do you put me in?
So, I mean, I don't know you guys personally so well, but I would probably put you, Nathan, in a Hunchback.
You bastard. Conversation over.
Just because I would really like to see what you do with the AC-20.
Okay, Michael.
And it's got a claw.
Yeah, okay, I'll take the claws. I'll do some Muay Thai. I'll raise my hands up. Let's go.
And then, Michael, you strike me as some kind of tactical sniping person. So you would get the rifleman. If I just have to pick the lance that I have.
Michael, I got screwed. You get a rifleman? Oh.
One of my favorite mechs is the Blackjack, and the rifleman is basically just like a bigger Blackjack. So I'm extremely cool with this decision.
You have to keep in mind, though, our rifleman is a super glass cannon. That can get you killed pretty quickly if you are not very careful.
Don't worry, Michael. I'll block you. That's my job. I'll stand in between you guys. I know what my job is.
You probably would have preferred the Locust, right?
I mean, I feel like perhaps Constantin has the wisdom of a leader that he didn't assign me the Locust, because I would prefer the Locust, but I definitely die in the Locust. And at least he's assigned something that I have the highest chance of survival, even though it is a mech I find distasteful. But at least he knows he wants me to come back to my family. Constantin, you're a good commander. I will follow you wherever you tell me to.
I mean, if you remember the scene with the Locust, the mech literally didn't turn on quick enough. So, yeah.
With how many times Nathan shuts down overheating his mech, accurate, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you take for granted in the games as well, that this super complicated fusion reactor just gets out of the emergency shutdown immediately, but what if it doesn't?
All right, so we know your favorite mech on 2 different levels in Hired Steel. Do you have a favorite pilot in Hired Steel? I'm interested about this question because, we see very little of the pilots. We see their personalities and stuff like that with a few lines, but you've probably built up scenarios behind the scenes that are bigger than this, and the actors definitely have. So you have a deeper understanding than we do as an audience.
This is just, as stupid as that sounds, this is just a budgetary reason, both on money and time and team resources.
Mm-hmm.
We would have loved to, I mean, there's nothing better to convey human emotions than a face, but we just don't have the bandwidth to show CG faces at that level, 4 of them, a lot. But I would really love to stay more inside the cockpit than outside, just to get that feeling across. Our voice actors have done a great job making a big metal robot seem like it have feelings. But for episode 4, we are doing a lot with the metahuman technology, and our team member Jan has designed these insanely good-looking pilot suits, cooling suits. Really, a lot of good stuff coming there. But my favorite pilot would I have to think of that. I think just from being biased about the script, it's Equus 2. I think we call him Mueller by now. And I can't go into detail why, but you will see.
That's the pilot of the catapult?
Yeah.
Cool. What's your favorite weapon?
Probably the PPC.
Okay, on the tank. Interesting.
You can put the PPCs on the mechs as well, but I mean, lasers, guns, and rockets are something that every universe has, but these PPCs are quite a unique weapon. And they combine this cool look of like a laser weapon with like something that actually flies through the air and leaves a streak. Yeah, and when they hit, they have like this EMP effect that you would have with like a atomic bomb going off. So it's a very unique weapon, and I really like the way it came out of the FX from the tank.
It sort of gives you license to make like a cool science fiction weapon, you know.
Exactly.
Everyone expects the lasers are going to look like real lasers, kind of. But, you know, the PPC, I don't know, that thing's crazy. You can make it just look as cool and science fiction as you want.
Exactly. And I mean, lasers, when you're talking about a game perspective, they are a super boring weapon. They arrive instantly, they have 100% accuracy, they have no splash damage, and you have to hold them on target. So they are probably the most realistic weapon here, apart from maybe the ballistics. But yeah.
What's your favorite dialogue and or sound effect?
That's a good question. So for sound, beginning with episode 3, we have onboarded a new member to our team, Chris, who's a professional sound designer for German television in Cologne. So shout out to Chris. He's done some really good stuff with the effects. So my favorite sound effect, and that sounds weird, is the Sidewinder growl. Do you know what that is?
Sidewinder growl. Sidewinder is the missiles?
Yeah. So Sidewinder is this American heat-seeking missile that is like in its 15th generation by now or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think the early Sidewinders, when you started to activate them and you were looking for the IR track in cockpit, they gave this audio representation of their tracking status. So they had this low growl, this electro sounding growl. And then when they locked onto an IR source, they had this higher pitched growl. This is a sound that I always found very scary. You can hear it in the background of these Gulf War recordings of like people dodging SAMs over Iraq and stuff. And it always sounds super intense because, you know, like there's something going on. And we used that sound and put it over the RPG sequence because it's like a heat.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Like our RPG is like a super weird combination of like an sci-fi RPG 7, and then when he looks down the scope, it looks like a javelin because it has this javelin tracker, and it makes the sound of a aviation heat-seeking missile. But that is probably my favorite sound, just because it's from the real world, and I really like to use that. The second best sound is probably the sound of the smoke grenades popping off from the catapult, because that is also taken from like a real video from, I think, like a Bradley test firing.
We're gonna have to go back and listen to the sound of the heat seeker again.
That's cool. So you've already touched upon using PGI's models, and I know that was initially your starting step, and you said you're designing new models now, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah.
I'm really wondering how using the PGI's models shaped the development of your content.
I mean, I mentioned this already, but PGIs, and I don't know like their exact team composition at that stage, but from what I know is that basically like most of the concept work that was done for MechWarrior Online in the early, they probably started developing like in 2010 or something, 2009, was done by Alex Iglesias. He goes by Flying Debris. Maybe you've seen that. He's done the cover art and stuff, and he's done some really, really, really good work getting all these, like I also mentioned already, kind of wonky, old school, pre-sci-fi looking concepts from I guess the 70s or 80s, and getting them into the 21st century and getting them to actually be able to stand up next to all the other sci-fi universes.
Yeah.
And keeping the original soul of the design and breathing like modern life into them. And then the other staff at PGI, like the 3D modelers and stuff, Aman Nori and all the other guys, really did a lot of work getting these 2D concepts into the 3D world and getting some insanely cool looking mech designs out there. And if you're looking at the first trailer from MechWarrior Online, I think they show like the catapult standing on the rock and then the Atlas with the glowing eyes and stuff. And if these mechs would have looked the way they did 40 years ago, it would have just looked ridiculous. Because, I mean, I'm not dunking on the old designs, but it's just stuff has evolved since then. Yeah. And the way that you can't build a 40-year-old car anymore, you just can't build a 40-year-old mech design anymore.
They could have had the old like Wii U, Wii U, Wii U sound effects and music as the mechs were coming up. Like it's this old school 40s radio drama, and then it would have fit perfectly.
But I don't think it would have had the same appeal. You know, I know Nathan has like a lot of fond memories of the old designs, but I'm a huge fan of PGI's designs, and I don't think they get enough credit all the time for like how much work must have gone into like modernizing decades of mech designs.
And there is a really, really fine line between sticking too much to the old stuff and changing too much. And considering that they have done literally, 100 mechs by now, and they consistently, sometimes more, sometimes less, really hit that on the nose. And especially for the iconic mechs like the Atlas or the Catapult or the Hunchback or whatever, they just look so good. And they just still look so presentable, even if you compare them to other IPs and other universes. And I mean, the Catalyst Game Lab Clan Invasion Kickstarter models and stuff, they also look very cool. But I think that wouldn't look the way it looks now without the groundwork being done by the team. But that's just my personal opinion. That was obviously the only thing we had, so we couldn't have used anything else, even if we wanted to. But that obviously sparked the inspiration much more. And I was always very sad to see, just because of the technical limitations of 2012 CryEngine 3 games, the low res textures that if you get close to them, you see like the pixels and stuff. So I would have really loved to see them like in more detail. And I still remember there was like a thread on the MechWarrior Online forums that had the texture resolutions of each mech combined in like a table, so you could see what the most high res mech was. And you could see, and you could really see the evolution of the game as it progressed through the 2010 years. And computers got more powerful. Again, that was the spark that sparked this whole thing, because when I had enough skills to do like texturing myself, I just thought, okay, why not try it out? And then I exported these mechs from MechWarrior Online and got them in Blender and figured out the UV layouts and stuff and got them into Substance Painter and did the 8K textures. And I had this cool environment map from work that we use for like Audi or BMW renderings to feedback with the client, because it's like this environment from like a harbor, and you can still see these renderings on my ArtStation. It's really that's where it's all started. It has like a great mix between bright and dark, and it looks very industrial, and it's kind of blue, and very good reflections going on. And I just used them, was really inspired by the result, and then this whole project kind of started rolling.
And I'm glad we're sort of, you mentioned like the openness and collaborative nature of both the community and the companies. I'm glad this is a property that you can do that sort of thing for. There are other properties out of there where that would have never flown. You would never have gotten this far with the project.
MechWarrior, and especially BattleTech, has its own issues with like licensing and stuff. And most of that I don't understand because I'm just a layman. But on the game side, the stuff that PGI has the authority to decide over, they have been as generous as you can be with it. They could have ended our channel in 2013. Nintendo did that at that time, so it was not unheard of. But they have been nothing but supportive, and now, 11 years later, they've collaborated with us. So.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
I also feel like they don't get enough credit. And if you are developing a PvP game, you get a lot of salty gamers, obviously. But they have done a lot for this universe, and I think BattleTech could have died a long time ago if it wasn't for PGI's work to like breathe as much life into it as they did.
On a personal note, I know you're a big skier. We've talked about that. I'm a big skier too, and I really am curious. Like I find, for example, I'm a skier, I'm a martial artist. I find that all these things somehow influence my creative endeavors in weird and unique ways. And I'm wondering if your passion for skiing in any way is influenced or connected to Hired Steel, or there's been any weird synergies or anything like that.
Skiing, at least in Germany, has this connotation of being a little bit of a privileged sport. Let's put it that way. Just because it's very expensive. Ski equipment is very expensive. Skiing tickets are insanely expensive. And going to another country to spend a week wasting electricity and resources to ride down a hill and going up again is also very privileged. So the way that I've been lucky enough to basically grow up on skis, and I guess plays along a little bit with being lucky enough to have 2 computers at home so I could play games that I want. So I wouldn't say they are necessarily connected in any way, but it is a sign of the same reason that I had a very lucky time, So I mean, a lot of people spend their childhood worrying about stuff. I've never had anything like that stop me or influence me in my life. So
once again, shout out to your parents.
I mean, skiing is also kind of I guess you could say, like, tactical sport. It's definitely not snowboarding, and it's definitely not other stuff you can do in your free time. So it's now that my girlfriend has joined us, or fiance has joined us a few times. She's like this. I don't know if you've seen this meme where it's like if you join into a skiing family as a non-skier.
Oh yeah.
And you see people like rolling down the hill while everybody else is like swinging down the mountain, and that's exactly what it is. Like she's never skied before, and then we put her on the red slope and basically drove off, which was a little bit unfair sometimes, but she really handled that super well. But it's like she joins us and she's riding with us and stuff. But I guess you just have to really do it like from age 4, as I did, to really live and breathe skiing as much.
That's fun.
That's awesome. So you mentioned this earlier, the concept of you having a big mistake or a big bungle in the Hired Steel videos pertaining to language. Now I want to dig into that. What was this bungle?
If you are looking at the end of episode 2, I think, where Tex has his little speech, like, I think he says, let us hope they do not see us coming, or something like that. I don't know the exact lines anymore, but he basically says something along these lines. We got a lot of comments on the way that our pilots speak, because our pilots say stuff like do not or have not instead of the don't and haven't that you say if you are using a more colloquial version of English. And we were notified of that apparently in BattleTech, this is a sign of clanners. Because they don't like to use these. I forgot the specific term.
Contractions.
Contractions, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They don't use contractions, and in the German translations of the novels, this is completely gone because we don't have that in German. It's not something that you could do.
That is hilarious. That is so cool.
So you've accidentally made secret clanners,
even though they are not, and people were like, oh, is like text secretly a clanner, or is this going to be like a big plot twist? And we were like, no, it is literally just a very big mistake.
So clanners, when you're reading the fiction, then, because clanners come across as very stiff in the fiction, do they come across in the German fiction the same way? Like, how else would they portray it? Because not using contractions is one way they do that. They add a lot of formality and stiffness.
So, I mean, I can't quote now from novels just because it's been a long time. If you're translating something, especially if you're translating stuff that is between the lines, like jokes or stuff like that, in Germany we have we have probably the best dubbing voice actors in the world. Just because they have a very long history, and we Germans take our dubs very seriously. For example, if you are in Poland, sometimes you have multiple roles for one speaker, or they just talk over the English soundtrack. And that is very jarring for me, because in Germany, we literally rebuild the entire sound design for every single movie we do. So we have these very old, very historic studios with lots of great voice actors that basically at the start of their career get like two Hollywood actors assigned to them and then stick to it until they die, basically. So the German voice of SpongeBob, for example, is like super iconic. And the same applies for books and written works of media. It's just, it depends on the skill of the translator. And I guess a lot of these, especially the first prints of these books were printed during a time where, let's say, not the highest budget was available for this intellectual property.
But did you ever like notice that like, oh wow, these clanners, they speak weird, or they seem really stiff, or just like, yes, that's how everyone speaks?
Yeah, they sound formal. Yeah, we have other ways in German to formalize speech. We have this whole Sie and Du theme where when you meet someone that's older than you never know how to really address them if they don't offer it to you, and that is super awkward in German. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance there, but this specific part of nuance is just lost in the novels, or in German, you can't abbreviate ich habe nicht oder sie werde nicht. You can't say sie werde nicht. That just doesn't work.
It's just
in
wrong.
our language.
Let's imagine a character that is a German character that is laid back and a German character that is stiff and formal. What is a character trait, or what is like a stereotypical thing you could do to showcase that difference that would make sense culturally from a German perspective? Someone who's relaxed, they're sitting on a chair, they could be slouching a little. Someone who's more stiff, hands rested on their knees, shoulders straighten up. Is there some equivalent like this that we could, from a dialogue perspective, they could have switched out?
We, as a language, I think, are very famous for having lots of very specific words for stuff that in English would get, like 12 things would get the same word. And in German, we have 20 words for 10 things. And in German, you can also just link words together to describe stuff. So you end up with these super funny, I mean, this is all like old coffee for you. You've probably heard about that already. So like I said, you have this way of addressing a person that can be formal or informal. Different versions of you, basically. And this is something that exists in other Latin languages as well. Even though I'm not super good with like Eastern European languages, but clothing would be a big thing. So my grandpa would I've never seen my late grandpa not at least in a shirt, if not a shirt, tie, and a suit and a hat probably. As a kid in Germany growing up, you always heard like sit up straight. Stuff like laughing out loud and stuff that just gets us our reputation of being very serious people. I've read somewhere that like German humor, it's no laughing matter. Even though that's not even true. It's just more like even more weird than British humor. You just have to know. And then it's super funny. Like we have super funny comedians in Germany. If I watch American comedians, it's just too much sometimes.
Yeah.
And that is just something that I think we just do. We are just way more reserved. And the farther along, so my fiance's family is from Poland. The farther along you get more into Eastern Europe, the more intense this feeling gets, like of people being very reserved. I spent half a year in the Baltics in Estonia, and a lot of people there don't even shake your hand because they just don't like physical contact. And that's just something you just have to get into your system.
Yeah, it's super interesting, like how these different cultural standards. And it's funny that you tripped over that in your robots shooting each other, your mechs shooting each other videos on the internet, and you stumbled over that.
Yeah. So what we do now is just we give our scripts to at least 2 or 3 native speakers before we do anything. We have people who are in the U.S. military who make sure that our radio call-outs don't sound super idiotic, and we have people who know some stuff about colloquialisms that we don't, as people from Western Europe. So yeah.
I do remember the line actually, and I didn't think it actually sound like, it does sound a little bit unusual, but coming from Tex, like having listened to a lot of Tex speak, he has a lot of particularities as well, and so it didn't sound that weird coming from him. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how Tex sounds.
Yeah, and that is probably why he just did it, because he thought it was written for him. But it was honestly just a misunderstanding in production. And there's so much more of that. Like I mentioned in the warm up, I think in episode 1, at the final zoom out after the logo, you can see that the rifleman just walks through a tree. He literally just clips through it because it's a 3D object that was in the way of another 3D object. So there's more stuff like that going on.
But for a project, when it's been built for a year, then things slip through. Like there's so much effort that went into this.
This is a very big issue, especially when the scenes get more and more complicated and you have to spend more and more time on each second of movie. For example, as an example, use the scene where the catapult steps on the tank. I've probably seen these 40 frames 500 times or more. And this is a very, very, very big. In Germany, we call this Betriebsblind, which is basically when you do something for too long, you don't notice the details anymore. And a trick that was taught to me by my old supervisor was basically just mirror the image horizontally. Because then you trick your brain into thinking that it's a new image. And you notice stuff that you don't notice before.
I wish English had a word for that. That's so nice and specific.
Yeah, there's a lot more examples like that.
Okay. I'm so interested about this clan speak. Okay, so we're gonna do a little scenario. Okay, so I grabbed a short story, a clan story, and there's a clanner talking in it. And I'm gonna see if we changed it, if we added this extra dialogue to every single written translation of German fiction, if their stiffness would have come out. Okay, so this is the original line. "This," he said, flicking his hand dismissively at the image of Idlewind as he turned to face them, "is Idlewind." Okay, so that's the normal line. If we changed it to this instead, "This," he said, flicking his hand dismissively at the image of Idlewind, his shirt crisply ironed, reflecting his stiff composure, "is Idlewind." If we added that line, every single time there's a clanner, he's wearing a shirt that's crisply ironed, and they have a stiff composure. Would it have been clear if we translate that, if that was added?
I probably went on too much about like clothing and exterior appearances. We have tools in our language as well. So this is a good example. He says, "This is Idlewind," right?
Yes.
So in Germany, you can either say, "Das ist Idlewind," or "Dies ist Idlewind." And this is all very, if you are from Germany and you hear this sounds super different. Because "Das ist Idlewind" is basically what I would say to my friends. And "Dies ist Idlewind" is something that you would read in like the German translation of Shakespeare.
Oh, okay.
Just different articles. And So I would be pretty sure that would be enough already. And you don't need to go on about his shirt.
That's actually pretty close to how we'd use contractions, I think. In English, you might go like, "That's Idlewind." And, it'd be like casual, or "Here, this is Idlewind."
Yeah.
Sort of similar. Maybe not as formal, but...
Okay, so your explanation provides an alternative that is sensible and reasonable. But could we use the shirt crisply ironed in every clanner line to still reflect the same thing? That's my question. Not should we, could we? Because then all the clanners are like preppies, man.
You also have to make sure that they never laugh.
Okay.
And they never say hello to you on the street.
Okay.
And also when you enter a grocery store, they don't do small talk.
That actually sounds very clanner-esque already.
Because that is like... obviously, I'm like super influenced by American culture and stuff, but the idea of somebody talking to me at the supermarket checkout is so weird. You can't even imagine. Like, or the thought of somebody touching my stuff and putting it into a brown paper bag. That is like it seems like a comedy sketch because that just doesn't happen here.
I just imagine Germans coming to Canada, checking their food out, and just like laughing as the person's talking to them. They're putting the bags, ha ha ha! What is this person? What's wrong with them? Oh, they're German. They do things differently there.
They would probably just look concerned, I guess. I think at Costco, they like the people, what do you call them, that pack your bags, basically? They like talk to you and like, "Oh, did you have a good day?" and stuff.
Yeah, it happens. I think small talk is even awkward for Canadians because people then feel like, oh, now I have to talk.
Yeah.
And that can be hard for lots of Canadians too. I was blessed with the power to small talk indefinitely. So I do not experience that.
I already picked that up. Yeah. I mean, that is like a meme here in Germany when an American wants to do this small talk that they don't really expect like an actual answer to.
Yeah.
They just do it out of politeness, and people are like, "Oh yeah, today at work was super hard for me, and I'm planning my next vacation." And then the American is irritated and like, "What is this? Like, why is he telling me that?"
I don't actually care.
Yeah, exactly. It's just politeness. Yeah.
So pulling us back to the realm of sanity, or perhaps sanity. I noticed when I was watching Hired Steel, there's a pretty clear dichotomy regarding how the characters are represented in episode 1 to episode 2 and 3. In episode 1, they're very militaristic. In episode 2 and 3, you really start seeing their personality come out. They feel a lot more like mercenaries. And I'm wondering how that evolution came about for you guys.
Yeah, so if you want the PR answer, is that it has something to do with like intricate storytelling and the progressing of time and character development. But the real answer is just that we started to learn how to write dialogue after that.
And probably the actors also at the same time got more comfortable in the roles, took more ownership of their characters.
We purposefully approached people from the community that had been streaming or were creators before, just for very egoistic reasons. First of all, that would expand our audience by itself. Second of all, they probably had a good audio setup and knew how to edit audio.
Mm-hmm.
And third of all, they are probably more interested in the whole topic if they create MechWarrior videos than if I approach like a professional voiceover artist. And fourth reason is just we had like literally a budget of 3 figures.
Yeah.
That is like the honest to God reason. We just didn't know how to write good stuff before, so we stuck with this militaristic Delta Echo 49 because it sounds cool, but it like doesn't really tell you anything about the person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fairness, I will say that even if you look at some of the roles I've done, you'll find that when I started a character and where the character ended across episodes is completely different. Because when you starting, especially within a dub, they really throw you in there and you're literally learning as you go.
Yeah.
And eventually you settle into a character. So there's always going to be that, like from the first line to the last line, there's always going to be that transformation. And that's the emotional connection that comes from the actors. So it is unavoidable.
And it's also like, I guess, us getting more familiar with our actors, because Equus 1 has a lot of Tech's actual personality in it, and Equus 4 or the Hunchback pilot has a lot of like Aggie's actual personality in it. I mean, I don't know her personally, but the way that she appears to me when she streams and when she makes a joke or whatever. So we really designed these characters around our people and our mechs. And considering that we approached this whole production pretty much exactly the other way around from like an actual professional production, like we started with the visuals, we started with the mechs, we started with like the tech, and Christopher Nolan probably starts with like really good book.
Yeah, you're right. Starting from the story, starting from a character perspective, I think is where most people start. But yeah, it's like, it's just that's the nature of creation in general. It just evolves. That's really cool. It's really cool that you started tailoring it to those individuals too, because that's how you really, especially if someone's not a professionally trained actor, that's really tailoring it to their personalities. That's really how you can bring out organic and sort of real performance.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and like scratching your head, I'm not saying that what we did is the right way. I would probably even advocate against it. And if I would start Hired Steel like now, I would take a completely different approach. Mm-hmm. But it's just the way that this thing evolved. Mm-hmm. It's just the way that 2020 happened, and I had 90 of my actual salaried work hours reduced, and I was just sitting around my living room. But I had to be on the computer because I had to be on call whenever something might happen. So I was sitting there doing nothing. And I'm like, okay, might as well do something cool, I guess. And that is just how this whole thing started.
Yeah. It got you here.
So in some of your previous interviews, you mentioned some of the big challenges of creating hired steel. And you mentioned that the biggest personal challenge across your teams was burnout, which makes sense. And that the biggest technical challenge was assets not updating across all scenes. But now that it's the future...
Oh, Jesus,
don't have a flashback. Don't have a flashback. It's okay. You're here. We're here to support you. Okay, well, maybe that answers my question. I want to say, if you had to name your biggest challenge now, has that changed, or is it still the damn assets not
No.
updating?
It has definitely changed. We are doing a completely different workflow. If I had to explain this to somebody who has not worked in any kind of media creation at all, it's like comparing driving a car to flying a plane. Like, the only thing that they have in common is that you're moving forward. Everything else is different. And that is very much the case. So what I was probably alluding to there, and that probably got me while we're in the middle of something, but a very, very big problem that you have when you are doing media creation as a team and you are working in a pipeline, because you have to imagine these things as like a pipeline with like stuff happening in sequence and sometimes coming in vertically. You start with your asset, you start with your geometry, and then you put a skeleton into that geometry, and then you put the geometry to the skeleton, and then you put movement on the skeleton. And then you take the moving geometry with the skeleton inside, and then you put it into a scene, and then you do your lighting, and then you do your environment, and then you do your effects, then you do your rendering, and then you have your final movie. And then you take that and you do some compositing and some grading, and then you put sound under it, and then you have your movie. That is in very abbreviated fashion, basically what happens. The biggest issue for us was, and this is something that is mirrored in professional production as well, this was also, we have faced the exact same problems in Autodesk Maya when I was doing professional advertisement. When you change something at the previous step, how do you make sure that all the other steps that you have already done update accordingly? How do you make sure that if you switch your mech from green to blue, that in your final image, it's also now blue and not still green? And software has found very different solutions for that. At the Autodesk world, they are called library overrides. In Blender, it's called appending and linking, or library overrides. That was something that really, really, really took us a long time and caused a lot of headaches, and was also, honestly, just still very buggy because Blender is not traditionally made for this kind of super professional pipeline and workflow.
And it's the type of challenge that like real full-size studios struggle with this. So you as a tiny project of, semi-professionals, like, how are you going to deal with that?
We had issues with like big TV advertisements for like the new BMW, where we switched, I don't know, the position of the rims, and then our rig broke, and then it didn't make contact with the floor anymore, and it was just a pain in the ass. And big studios have people that are paid full time to not have this happen, and that are super clever in programming, and these are some of the smartest people around, and they earn a lot of money as well. But obviously, like, first of all, I'm not that clever. Second of all, I can't program at all. And third of all, we don't have any money. So
yeah. So it just became one more thing for Constantin to take care of on the project.
Again, credit to the team, Andreas and Bernard, who can actually write a Python script and to do some programming and debugging. They did an insane amount of work on that, and in the end, everything worked. But yeah, it was. I can probably fill the entire evening just talking about technical difficulties. So
the answer, in short, is the biggest challenge across the project is just technical difficulties in multiple different avenues that just are kicking you in the balls over and over again.
Yeah, you're basically, the idea is in my head and in our head, and the story is there. And if I could plug my brain into my computer, you would already have Hired Steel episode 32. But the problem is getting the idea through my arms into the keyboard and into like an actual pixel. It's just the way that media creation is going in our time. that you have to go through these workflows and these processes. And now people are saying AI will change everything about that, but I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any creative authority and you don't have any control about that stuff.
Yeah.
Right now, our biggest challenge, like I said, is like switching to Unreal. And Unreal has been sometimes, if you're talking to an Unreal artist about how many times his software crashes, probably the eyes go into like the 1,000-yard stare, and they get PTSD from all the lost work. And this has been exactly our
Oh, man.
I'm glad your technical problems are different than they used to be.
Yeah, they are different now, but they are definitely not in any way less. With Unreal 5, you really feel that it is a game engine.
Mm-hmm.
And people now do movies with a game engine, but it is still very, very much a game engine. And it is a fundamentally different workflow, especially when you're looking at the stuff that I'm doing, like effects and lighting and rendering. It's just, I had to relearn a lot of stuff, and it's been a really humbling experience. And it's really the reverse Dunning-Kruger effect, where you really realize how much you actually don't know and still have to learn.
Yeah.
So you just actually mentioned storytelling, which is a good segue to our next question. What has been your most difficult storytelling objective to reach? And do you feel like you've actually reached it?
No, definitely not. Whenever I work together with actual professional people who do storytelling or who do like really like actual artistic editing and stuff, and making sure that like shots work in sequence. And again, big shout out to the team at PGI, because they have some phenomenal people over there. I realized how amateurish some of the hired steel stuff like just feels. And I guess I really suffer from imposter syndrome, because I really don't feel like hired steel is that great. It's probably just the only thing around. And I would really like to redo a lot of stuff, but then I would have to probably clone myself.
Just keep taking more steps forward. There's always more stories to tell.
Yeah, exactly. But the way that some people are able to pull you into a good book, or this feeling when you have a good book and you read through everything and then you are done and you just feel empty because it's over. And I would really like to reach that point with our story. But it gets so difficult, and it's such a hard to define art form. And you can watch a YouTube tutorial on how to do a good explosion, but you can't really watch a YouTube tutorial that tells you like which words you need to use to get a good story going. It's just so untangible and specific that I really do much better with like technical explanations that I can actually execute apart from like this fluid artistic stuff.
That's why you like BattleTech. You like the big machines.
Yeah, probably that's
Just get AI to write your story. I'm sure it'll make complete sense. This next episode of Hired Steel, storytelling by AI. Oh my God, could you imagine the madness that would happen?
I've done a lot of experiments with all kinds of AI, and even though I don't want to sound like cringy or whatever, but I tried it before it was cool. And I had local versions of like Midjourney running on my own like actual graphics card when they still put out mangled hands and warped faces. You can really feel that it's just a remix of what they put in as a data set. And you can really, just go on Midjourney or Bing AI or whatever they're called nowadays and try to get an image of a MechWarrior mech out of it. You won't. You will just get like a generic robot, because you really notice that they didn't put any kind of training data into these algorithms because it's too niche. And I think that will end up being the big dampener on this whole hype, because it's just a reproduction of what they put in. First of all, it's probably illegal. And there's like big discussions going around about copyright right now. But also, when it's just a remix, it still depends on the quality of the input. A lot of my fellow artists now, when they're looking for reference pictures on Google, use like the tag before 2021, because if you are as an artist looking for reference pictures now on Google Images, 90% of it is AI results. And they're just so inconsistent and non-designed and don't have any kind of notion of human brain behind it that you can't use these as a reference. You need to have good reference pictures, so you can, as an artist, do your own brain remix of stuff. Because I don't claim that all my results are original ideas that have never been done before. Definitely not. It's just a big remix of everything that has influenced me. But if what has influenced me is crap and just created by an algorithm, it probably doesn't result in a good image.
I want to know if you have something you could define as the most rewarding experience in the project so far or associated with the project so far. Is there something that pops to mind? I think I know what it is, but I want to ask you directly. I don't want to, make an assumption.
I would be interested to hear your assumption, actually. But I think two things. So on a professional level, it's just the way the fact that what we do is apparently good enough to get into like professional works of media, in our case, like the new video game, and being able to like do the teaser for a video game. I've not been lucky enough to do that before. But on a personal level, I think even more rewarding is just seeing the reactions and seeing, especially now with episode 3 being pretty much a year ago by now, people coming like, okay, where's episode 4? I'm waiting for so long. And I don't know, my son has asked me already, or seeing like getting these short glimpses into people's life that we actually are some kind of part of it, and people actually like what we are doing enough to be bothered to ask and to go online and write a comment. And I mentioned in the preparation meeting already that our statistics, the ratio of likes and comments per 1,000 views is like 2 or 3 times higher than on YouTube normally. And that is just like, I mean, it's probably the best thing you can get, because that is like, in actual data, the proof that you are doing something that people actually like.
Yeah.
Can't get really much more rewarding than that.
It's not just mass market virality. It's something that like the people in the community, they really like this, and they want to, like you were saying, they want to come and tell you about it.
And I mean, we are definitely aware of all the stuff that is not good with Hired Steel. And we definitely, for every 100 positive comments, the one negative comment you get is the one that you think about when you're in the shower. But we certainly do our best with the resources and the time limits that we have. And you just have to understand that we are all doing full-time jobs with something very different. And that we all have like family obligations and stuff. Like, for example, the reason you don't see Andreas' name in the credits anymore is because he's gotten married, has gotten 2 kids, built a house. And I mean, that just presents you with a very different life situation than having a girlfriend and sitting at your computer all day. We would certainly like to be a full-time paid team. Even beyond that, go out and pay artists like a market rate and stuff. But it's just not possible. And I mean, you have the choice between Hired Steel or nothing. So if you rather take nothing, cool. But I mean, we're doing what we can. So
totally.
On the topic of Hired Steel, the Clan Invasion trailer, working with PGI, those collaborations and all that fun stuff, what is next for you, good sir?
What is next is, I think, what has been publicly announced, and also in the interview with Russ Bullock from NGNG, which is also something that you should definitely listen to, because it gives you a lot of insight into what they are doing for the new game. We are still working with them. And we are doing stuff for MechWarrior clans, that is MechWarrior 5 clans, that is beyond the teaser that you have already seen. And that is still ongoing. That is probably everything that I can say. Like I said, they are super cool and stuff, and I could probably say more, but I just want to stay in my lane and not get ahead of anything else. But I can personally vouch for the stuff that we are doing, and we wouldn't do it if it wouldn't be super cool. I can tell you that much, because that is the positive side of what I just mentioned. We all have careers. We are all not reliant on this projects. And if everything would stop tomorrow, I would still have a full-time job doing something else. Maybe not as cool, but that is also very lucky. So we would have not joined this project if it wasn't super cool, and if we weren't 110% convinced that it was something that people will absolutely love. And that is the next evolution step, and on a level that people have never seen before. So, yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm really excited to play MechWarrior 5 Clans. I'm excited to get back to a real story-driven MechWarrior game again, and I'm excited to play as the crazy Smoke Jaguars.
And I mean, they are using Unreal 5 now. That is also not a secret anymore. So just the graphical fidelity and the stuff that you can do on the technical side is also way evolved and stuff. So that is very cool. We are also much more engaged now in the actual BattleTech community. So you have seen us in the Text Talks BattleTech episodes before. We started out with like 2 short renderings in the Hunchback episode. Then for the UrbanMech episode, we provided 2 much larger Unreal animations already, the UrbanMech Factory and the UrbanMech City Fight, which we used kind of as a test bed for everything that we've been doing in Unreal Engine. And that is also ongoing, and we have other collaborations that might start. And then also there's like the big episode 4 topic. A few weeks ago I posted a big update after being silent on it for a long time, just because it's now 1 year since episode 3 launched. And we would have loved to be done already, but it's just a culmination of all of the things that we have already talked about so far, like the technical challenges, the real life stuff going on for me and for the rest of the team, and also the other projects that obviously also take time. It's just also the fact that episode 4 is like, I think, 8 minutes at this point.
Yeah.
Which is like literally the length of 2 episodes that we've done before, or even 2.5.
You learned more and you got more ambitious.
It is way more ambitious, and it's literally double the amount of time, double the amount of animation, double the amount of sound design, double the amount of storyboards. I have the storyboard printed out on my wall here, and it's 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 pages of storyboard. I've taped it to my wall, so it's always in my peripheral vision.
That almost sounds a little bit like some sort of eldritch horror. I've pasted it on my wall, so it's always in my peripheral vision. I can always see it. I can always see it.
Yeah, on the episode 3, I did the same. Back then, it was just half the amount of pages, and I started writing on the pages because obviously, like from storyboard to like final result, a lot of stuff changes. Just because the translation between 2D and 3D is something that it's affecting more than you might think. You just can't represent a comic page in 3D space. It just doesn't work. And you have to do a lot of interpretation and transitionary work. So I've started to draw in it a lot. And when the episode was done and I took a step back, it looked like these, in the movie when they are planning like a bank heist and they have like this pinboard and all of these connecting dots, or if you're like a detective and you're hunting down a case, and it starts to look a little bit concerning probably for other people.
Hey man, she still said yes to the engagement, so that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Yeah, our families deserve a lot of credit for putting up with our stupid little robot hobby.
So if people want to find more about you and Hired Steel, where should they go? I know you guys have a website, you have a social media presence, I believe. You're on YouTube. Where should they go?
So the main hub is probably YouTube. We you will find us by typing Hired Steel in the search bar. You find our channel. We are called TMC. YouTube is probably the biggest community that we've built. I think we are at like 35,000 subscribers, which is absolutely insane. When we started the project, we were at 750. I still remember that. And it took 7 years to get to that. And now within 4 years, we are at 35,000, which is, like I said, crazy. I have a Twitter account or X account that I'm moderately active on and tweet about some personal stuff sometimes as well. We have a Patreon that you can support if you want. In order of activity, you probably should stick to YouTube and Patreon.
Okay, well, I'll grab those links from you and I'll make sure to share them in the show notes of this episode. So if you are listening and you're like, I need more Hired Steel, I need more Constantin, I need more. If you are thinking what I'm thinking internally right now, then you just click on those links and you will get it, listener.
And if you haven't listened, if you haven't watched Hired Steel somehow, and you, I don't know, listened to this whole interview and didn't go and watch it, go and watch it. It's rad.
And it's also very short. You can quickly watch it.
It's a lot shorter than our episodes, everybody. It's the perfect way to cool down from this episode, if you haven't seen it already.
It's also something that I think since episode 1, we have used this YouTube Premiere feature. And I think our first premiere had like 30 viewers, and then the second one had like 300, and then the most recent one had like 700 people watching live. And that is always like a little moment of celebration in our Discord. Then we all sit down and show images of like sitting in front of the family TV with like a can of beer and stuff and some snacks. And then you always have this moment where the episode, it's going to end in the next 20 seconds. And then in the chat, you see when the episode actually ends, like people are like, oh, that's it already. Oh no. And now I have to wait another year. And oh no, it's already over. And what is what it? And because we always end on a cliffhanger, it really doesn't feel as long as it feels during production.
Nathan can relate to that.
I can relate to that, yes, for sure. Anyhow, this is actually a question from our patrons, rather. And I know you've mentioned this before, but just perhaps wanted some more updated information. If people were interested in actually dabbling in this form of creating videos like you have, where would you recommend they go to start? Do you have a single source they can go to play with something or some videos or anything like that you'd like to share?
So the good news is there has never been a better time than now. This whole area has made incredible advances, openness and availability, even since I started studying in 2015. Like I said, I had to study privately. Now in Germany, you can study this at a normal university already. So for free, basically. And then you go online and you can download Blender or Unreal Engine, both for free, which are probably the only softwares you will ever need to produce Hollywood-level animations in your living room or basement or bathroom or whatever, wherever you have put up your computer. You don't need a NASA PC anymore. You only need your gaming rig or your laptop. And you can learn anything you want. You don't even need to study it. You can just go on YouTube and watch a tutorial series, or if you want, you can buy like a course for $100 or whatever. But it's all, come on, it's like probably the lowest hurdle to any hobby ever. Just download Blender, download Unreal Engine, watch a few of the highest rated YouTube videos with like 10 million views, and you will get going.
Get out there.
And also the communities are huge. Don't get too illusioned. It will take time and it will take a lot of effort, and it just takes a lot of your time that you can spend riding your bike or barbecuing with your friends. So we are still not at the point where you plug your brain into your PC and everything just starts appearing. But if you show the dedication and if you are willing to do stuff 10 times before it finally looks the way you want, then you can just do anything you want in your living room. And there are examples of 16-year-old artists that quit school that have produced stuff that is so beyond anything I could ever do in their living room on their dad's PC, basically. So just start.
Get out there and make something.
Very cool. Well, Constantin, this has been super fun, exciting, interesting. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, to listen to us, to put up with me personally. I know Michael's easy to get along with, but I know you've been biting your tongue to be polite to me. So thank you so much for being here and being open and everything.
No. You guys are very good. I mentioned this off the air already 2 times, but I was really impressed by your preparation and all your questions and the amount of work that you put into like even listening to what I've already said so that nothing's doubled for your audience. And that is something that I've not seen a lot. I think the other way around is probably the trend right now to go into more and more low effort content, just putting anything you want on the internet because the silliest TikTok dance will get 500 million views. So,
man, you're going to hate our next segment where we make you do a TikTok dance.
It's a new segment. Hey, that's a good idea. BattleTech theme.
No, that's
TikTok
a terrible
dances.
idea. Nathan,
No,
don't
Michael.
stop thinking
No,
about
Michael.
It. Don't think about it
There's no
anymore.
such thing as a bad idea. It's locked in.
No.
Noted. All right. Well, this has been a blast. Thank you so much, everyone. Keep on listening for our next segment.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. Holovid technology has been ubiquitous in military, industrial, and entertainment use for more than 500 years, but still has not fully replaced flat-screen videos. In large part, this is due to the massive volumes of data required for high-resolution tri-video capture. Modern shoulder-carried tri-video cameras are extremely portable, some weighing less than 4 kilograms, but can only capture around 2 hours of video on a standard vid chip. Meanwhile, two-dimensional video cameras can store 6 hours or more on an equivalent chip. In this program, we will examine the differences in the two technologies and their recordings, as well as lost tech discoveries which suggest hundreds of hours of video might have been stored in a single palm-sized device. This is the sphere we live in.
Tertiary objective: Stories of the Inner Sphere segment. Initiating.
Solaris Gaming Commission Headquarters, Solaris City, Solaris 7, Lyran Commonwealth, 3 July 3122. Atop the 44th floor of the Solaris Gaming Commission building, one of the gleaming new towers to rise from the ruins of the International Zone in the decades after the Jihad, the office of the Chief Commissioner reverberated with explosions and flashes of laser light. The high-end holo projection system put Commissioner Cyrus Matherwood IV right in the middle of the action, allowing him to keep an eye on how his games were being run. The projector was currently displaying a match in Cathay's Jungle Arena, pitting a Tandrek Stables Tianzong against a D. Napoli Stables Delore in its debut match on Solaris 7. The cutting-edge Republic OmniMech's Clan-Tech Gauss rifle and laser batteries gave it a serious edge. But the Kaplan pilot was making excellent use of the home field advantage, literally fading away into the arena's dense foliage with its stealth armor as it landed blow after blow with its own Gauss rifles. Matherwood waved his hand to pull up floating displays on the pilots, the machines, and the betting spreads, and scrutinized the scrolling data feed.
Mute audio. Begin recording. Notes for next commission meeting. Item 1. Have the imaging array at the jungle checked again to screen out the EM interference from mechs with stealth systems. Some static is still getting through. It's all well and good for Tandrek if other duelists can't see their target, but mechs that disrupt the camera feeds make rotten holovid fodder.
Closing his fleshy hand into a fist, he minimized the battle and pulled up images of two more mechs. One was a new Novacat design, while the other was a rare quadruple model with a feline appearance. They rotated slowly in midair as he resumed recording.
Item 2. Zelberg and Stables had petitioned for permission to import and field a cave lion. I recommend approval. New gear always brings out the eyeballs, and the claws might finally tempt those clanners into some close-quarters action. Item 3. Same situation. Regulus Ross Stables has requested permission to field a Saroth. They admit the Regulan Hussars won't let anyone else have them yet. But the aesthetics are magnificent. I recommend approval. Tell the Wraith if they can get their hands on one. The Commission will arrange an exhibition match for the debut. End recording. Save to archive.
Tapping his earpiece, Matherwood opened a line to his office manager.
Lloyd, I'm wrapping up for today. Anything else on my schedule?
You're all set for tomorrow's planning meeting for the Republic Senate delegation, and you've got a Mr. Jansen still waiting in the reception area.
Jansen? He's still here.
Matherwood sighed.
Send him in. He's got 2 minutes.
The thick, tall tree's mahogany double doors swung slowly open, admitting the lanky form of Rufus Jansen. In contrast to Matherwood's conservative business suit, complete with an understated half cape and ear-height collar, Jansen wore a violently purple and yellow checkered sports coat of a cut that had gone out of fashion with Amaris. Matherwood attempted to summon a pleasant smile.
Mr. Jansen, thank you for waiting.
He gestured at the holo display.
As you can see, I've been immersed in my work. Now, to what do I owe the honor?
Jansen glared at the commissioner, then pulled a crumpled plash sheet from his coat pocket and shoved it forward. Well, Comish, maybe you can start by explaining why this says my application to fight in the Grand Tournament qualifiers was rejected. I've got more wins under my belt than half the people who qualified last year. Matherwood made a show of glancing at the printout, though he knew very well what it said, having issued the denial personally. The legal terms are clear, Mr. Jansen. The Commission reserves the right to exclude any participant for any reason. We are committed to crafting the greatest spectacle in the inner sphere, and only those who are proper fit may take part. And you, sir, may have a winning record, but your BattleMech is not suitable for the modern games. Based on your record, should you acquire a more competitive machine, we can revisit the issue of your qualification. What's wrong with the Dark Angel? She's a fighter. I'll sign any waiver you want if you think the open class is too risky for me. Matherwood noted the stress creeping into Jansen's voice and the trembling of his hand. His own hand unconsciously crept toward the panic button in his pocket to summon security, if needed. His cultured tones took on a harsher edge. What's wrong with your Dark Angel, sir, is that it is an urban mech. While such equipment has its place in Zalara and the lesser circuits, we must consider the aesthetics of the big game. Billions of fans watch our tournaments because the warriors and their equipment are the best of the best. He gestured to the still-rotating Sarath hologram. Our machines must present themselves as fierce, aggressive, and menacing. Tell me, Jansen, have you ever heard of any of those words used to describe an urban mech? For Blake's sake, they make plush urban mechs for children to cuddle. Above all, we are putting on a show, and I would soon let someone feel the Yeoman as your rotund little fire hydrant. Jansen withdrew the blast sheet, and his expression settled into a sneer. So, that's how it is, huh? Maybe I can make it worth your while? Kroner? Stones? Maybe some synthetic necrosia? Outrage colored Matherwood's portly features as he jabbed the panic button to summon security. Now get this straight, Jansen. This is 3122, not 3022, and we are not the Battle Commission of old. We do not fix matches for gangsters. We do not take bribes, and we do not tolerate scum like you in our sport. The double doors opened again to admit a pair of burly security officers, stun batons held at the ready. These gentlemen will see you out. Matherwood waved Jansen dismissively toward the exit. Our business is concluded. I trust that I never need to hear your name again. The Scrapyard. North Pier, Solaris 7. Lyran Commonwealth. 5 July 3122. Not good enough for the big leagues, are you? We'll show 'em, baby. We'll show this whole damn planet. Jansen's left hand gripped the throttle and jet triggers while his right flew across the console, adjusting the sensors and target interlocks. Through the ferroglass viewports, his internal lighting switched to a dull red to avoid glare. He could see towering stacks of metallic scrap laser welded into thick walls, looming over the uneven floor of an ancient junkyard. It was said that if you looked at the right part of the walls, you could find bone-white painted wreckage dating from the Blakist Jihad. Some even said that if you dug deep enough, you could find some Manet Domini cyborgs welded into the walls and left to die. Today's targets weren't Blakist, though. Just other bottom-rungers in the Class 2 featherweight circuit, the only commission-sanctioned matches where an urban mech could compete. The match was edging into its 10th minute and had already claimed at least a long shot and a kabuto, based on the wrecks Jansen had come across. Poor visibility was a key feature of the scrapyard. The dense metal piles blocked electromagnetic sensor readings and active probes, and the night fighting schedule hampered vislight. The powerful searchlights sweeping across the maze of twisted wreckage and industrial waste kept the thousands of spectators aware of what was going on. But a fighter, down in the thick of it, had to outthink their opponents and rely on superior reflexes. Case in point, Jansen had configured his targeting system to pull data from the urban mech seismic sensors. Not so useful for aiming the guns, but perfectly capable of letting Dark Angel know when another mech was moving nearby. Right now, his display showed mech-sized movement on the far side of the scrap pile he was using for cover. When the blip on his screen moved into a choke point in his rough map overlay, Jansen thumbed the jet trigger to launch Dark Angel skyward on argent flares, just clearing the top of the wall and narrowly missing a dome-mounted floodlight at its apex. The squad urban mech, painted coal black with metallic Red Angel wings sweeping across the rear torso armor, landed with a solid crunch and found its target, a Duan Gung shuffling sideways to clear the narrow alley. Unable to dodge, the light mech was easy prey for Dark Angel. Jensen's lasers melted away armor, exposing the myomer bundles inside, and his follow-up particle cannon strike reduced the arm and a substantial section of the torso to a blackened crater. The other pilot panicked and tried to turn to face their attacker, but only succeeded in wedging their mech tightly into the choke point. Seeing the blue glow of Dark Angel's PPC capacitor increasing in intensity, the pilot signaled surrender and powered down. A loud crump from across the arena signaled the match was down to its final 2 combatants. Avoiding the narrows, Jansen feathered Dark Angel's jets to skim the tops of the twisted metal walls and vector toward the heat flare showing on his thermal sensor readout. The electromagnetic scans just came back as solid contact readings while the external cameras showed only darkness, but his last opponent had to be out there. Noting an anomaly picked up by the active probe, Jansen landed in the open area at the southern end of the arena and dialed up the magnification. What was left of a Cossack had been scattered across more than 30 meters, a fire still raging in the hollowed husk of its torso, where its missiles had apparently cooked off. Seismic sensors showed something approaching swiftly from Dark Angel's rear. Crimson spears slashed at Jansen's Duralex armor, boring deep pits into the plating. But the armor, one of the urban mech's strongest aspects, held up to the laser barrage as Jansen turned to face the onrushing foe. The porcupine, vanishingly rare even on Solaris, was covered with sharpened spikes and specialized in ramming attacks. At this distance and at this speed, there was no way to evade it, even with jump jets. Of course, while Dark Angel didn't have any spikes, it did have its sophisticated sensors, which had detected the acid pit concealed under a thin sheet of metal plating, enabling Jansen to land with it covering his vulnerable rear approach. The sheet metal cover gave way instantly as the onrushing BattleMech put its weight on it, sending the machine plunging into the seething pool of corrosive liquid. The porcupine thrashed frantically, grabbing a bent girder and trying to pull itself out of danger.
"Oh no you don't, boyo!"
Jensen shuffled Dark Angel forward and planted its broad, flat foot on the porcupine's face, shoving it back into the acid bath. Defeated, its pilot signaled surrender, ending the match. On Dark Angel's external pickups, the enthusiastic hooting of the crowd came through well enough, but still sounded thin and hollow compared to the kinds of audience at the grand tournament. Jansen patted his mech's console. "That's step 1, baby." The Cabin, North Pier, Solaris 7, Lyran Commonwealth, 6 July 3122. The scarred wooden table matched the rest of the dive bar, but at least the beer, brewed next door, was passable, Jansen thought. His companion at the table, a top-knotted man whose tattoos proclaimed him to be a Yakuza Teppodama, and whose missing digits suggested he wasn't very good at it, clearly disagreed, restricting his intake to a small sake flask. "The way I see it, Nakamura-san, I not only won the match, but I covered the spread on who went down in what order. Just because the first 2 took each other out doesn't change who hit the ground first. Pay up." Jansen proffered his noteputer, the screen set to transaction mode. Scowling, Nakamura put his thumb on the scanner and authorized payment, then pushed back from the table and staggered toward the door, shouldering aside a burly blonde man in a Solaris City Police Department's major uniform. Jansen waved the officer to his table and signaled a passing waiter for another round. "Rufus, long time no see. You still scamming the bookies into letting you bet on your own matches? Jansen smirked. It's not like I'm betting on someone else and throwing fights, Dermot. They see me betting on myself and hear UrbanMech, and they get greedy. Nakamura's gonna need a retinal scan to pay me next time, since his Oyabun'll probably take his thumbs for this payout. Jansen took mugs of Solaran Dark from the waiter, who cheerfully accepted it, raising it respectfully to Jansen before downing a quarter. He adjusted the controls of the noteputer to show the full account balance and handed it to Dermot, who whistled appreciatively. So, what now? You retire from the Irby Derby to an estate on Greyland and live the good life? Not quite. That's my intake from bets with every bookie in Zalara. I'm a persona non grata with them for at least a year, so this is my shot to make good on a family obligation. Dermot grimaced. Not that business with your great-grandfather again. He was crazy, and you're just as crazy for trying to do this. Jansen tapped the noteputer screen. This kind of nest egg should buy just enough crazy to let the old man rest in peace. You and the boys in the SCPD Mech Corps still running mostly Irbies? Not as many as when you and Dark Angel left. Half are peacemakers these days. All the veterans are sticking with the battle mechs, though. Rookies get the industrial mechs. Perfect. If the old crew is up for some creative overtime, this should cover expenses, some paint for plausible deniability, and a fair amount of looking the other way. Dermot, his eyes still on the noteputer screen, waved for another Solaran Dark. This is gonna buy a fair amount of silence, but I'm not signing off on anything until I know the plan. Jansen smiled. With the police, just like with the mob, greed was all it took to get things going on Solaris 7. It might be 3122 and Devlin's Stone Pax Republica on the 44th floor of the Gaming Commission. But here, in Zalara, the 31st century ways of doing things were still going strong. First off, we'll need passenger manifests for inbound flights and access codes for the tunnel network. Matherwood Estate, Black Hills, Solaris 7, Liran, Commonwealth, 29 July, 3122. Stretching his bulk out on the sumptuously appointed Branth leather seats of his Avanti hover limousine, Commissioner Matherwood signaled his driver to depart the grounds of his fortified estate in Solaris City's Black Hills district. The lift fans whirred into action, filling the plenum chambers with a steady flow of air, and sent the sleek black vehicle down the private lane and into the wealthy heights of the Davian-aligned neighborhood. Never one to waste a minute of the day, Matherwood opened a channel to his office manager.
Lloyd, please confirm that the Republic senators are on schedule for arrival. I'm en route to the spaceport to meet their ship.
The reply crackled over the microcommunicator in his ear.
Confirmed. The senatorial dropship is descending from high orbit. I've confirmed their bookings at the Solaris Hilton, and you'll be hosting a reception for them in the Coliseum Skybox tonight, followed by an exhibition match between warriors from Dinapoli and DeLon stables. Biographies of the senators, your speech, and the vital status of the fighters and their mechs have been uploaded to your noteputer.
Thank you, Lloyd. Dinapoli had better put up a good fight. I intend to get an extra 2% out of the Republic distribution deal when it comes up for renewal next year, and I want those senators in a good mood before I jack up the price.
The chauffeur interrupted.
Apologies, Commissioner, we may be late to the spaceport. Police are diverting traffic up ahead.
As the limousine crawled past the police roadblocks, its lift fans humming, Matherwood could see a gaping hole in the street where the ferrocrete surface had collapsed into the service tunnels under the street. SCPD officers were keeping civilians back from the edge, as a crane struggled to winch something out of the depths.
Blake's blood. I will not be late for the Republic ship. Driver, see if you can find a faster route.
At the next police checkpoint, the chauffeur alerted the squad leader to the presence of his VIP passenger. Matherwood lowered his window and addressed the officer directly. "Ma'am, are you quite aware of who I am? I must insist that you let my driver through so we can reach the spaceport. I have a vitally important meeting that cannot be delayed." The officer nodded.
"Yes, sir, Commissioner, of course, sir."
She signaled to her squad, who pulled their charioteer squad car back enough to let the limousine through. The chauffeur brought the fans up to maximum as he tried to make up lost time, racing through the slums of the Black Hills Central neighborhood. In the rear of the limousine, Matherwood shook his head. "You just have to know how to talk to the little people, and they'll stand aside for the elites who run this city." Resuming communications with Lloyd, Matherwood settled back and ignored the high-speed parade of burnt-out tenements, squatter camps, and panhandlers flashing by his heavily tinted window glass. "Sorry, Lloyd. As I was saying earlier, we should do something tied to the Kellhounds. The newsvids are full of stories about Colonel Maria Allard's recent demise. What do you think if we use Boreal Reach to reenact the Hounds' battle against the Genyosha?"
"Very tasteful, sir, I can..."
Lloyd's response was drowned out in a screeching torrent of static. The limousine turned sharply, bleeding off speed as the undercarriage scraped along the Ferrocrete roadway, sending up a shower of sparks. Only the chauffeur's expert skill, a legacy of his earlier career racing in the Berlingrad Hoverdrome, kept the limo from flipping over. "Blake's blood, what the hell?" Matherwood exclaimed before a tremendous impact shook the vehicle. The chauffeur screamed and dove out of the door onto the street as a crushing weight bore down on the car's hood and smashed the engine flat. The rear of the car went upward for a moment before it slammed back down onto the roadway, shattering the remaining window panes. Ears ringing, Matherwood crawled out of the empty rear window and stared in shock at the scene around them. The limo had come to a rest in the middle of an intersection in a long abandoned portion of the slums, its front flattened beneath the foot of a white and blue UrbanMech with silver accents. Of the chauffeur, there was no sign. The telltale roar of jump jets firing made him look up. Atop every intact roof stood an UrbanMech, the morning sunlight glinting off their cockpit canopies. Every few seconds, jets roared, and another UrbanMech sailed aloft to join those already there, their heavy cannons tracking Matherwood's every movement. A flock of birds, startled by the clamor, exploded upward in a thunder of flapping wings, leaving a small cloud of feathers in their wake. Matherwood raced for one of the abandoned storefronts, seeking the comfort of its notional shelter. The roar of jump jets sounded above. The backwash from a landing UrbanMech buffeted him, bowled him over into the middle of the street, and tore his half-cape away, sending it whirling upward on the hot wind. Seeing no way to escape on the roads, the commissioner crawled, bruised and sobbing, to a manhole in the middle of the intersection. His meaty fingers scrabbled at the releases, tearing off 2 fingernails before it popped open to reveal a ladder descending into the darkness. "They can't follow me down here! They can't follow!" Matherwood gasped as he threw himself into the hole and clambered down the ladder into the service tunnel. Trying to orient himself in the dark passage, he peered into the pitch blackness. The tunnels were normally lit, but even the emergency lights were off. He wasn't terribly surprised given the state of the neighborhood above. Proper maintenance of this section probably hadn't been done since before the jihad. He could hear and smell water running in the center of the tunnel, suggesting seepage from the Solaris River was an issue as well. A boom reverberated through the tunnel, a mech footstep. Matherwood's breath caught in his throat. One of them was down here too, in the dark. Another boom, and a wave of water sloshed up onto the siding, soaking the commissioner. The manhole, detecting no further movement on the ladder, automatically snapped closed, cutting off the lone ray of sunlight from above. Matherwood whimpered and pushed himself against the tunnel wall. A row of dull red lights flickered into being halfway to the tunnel ceiling, casting a hellish glow on the tunnel and revealing the silhouette of a black-painted UrbanMech looming over him. Matherwood screamed. A voice boomed over the external speakers, echoing in the tunnel confines.
Hiya, Comish.
What? Jansen?
None other. Enjoying the spectacle?
Spectacle? That's what you call attempted murder?
Murder? Lake forbid, Comish. We're just crafting the greatest spectacle you've ever seen, with plenty of ferocity, aggression, and menace.
You're insane. I'll have you doing 50 years hard labor on a Hesperan penile moon.
Now, Comish. What would Solaris be without holo cameras to record all the action?
A projector mounted in place of the UrbanMech small laser showed holo images Jansen had somehow recorded in Matherwood's office. The commissioner listened to his own words, echoed back at him.
All machines must present themselves as fierce, aggressive, and menacing. Tell me, Jansen, have you ever heard of any of those words used to describe an UrbanMech?
The audio loop repeated, but now with tri-vid footage of Matherwood running, screaming, and crying in the face of the UrbanMech horde.
Why, yes, Mr. Comish.
Jansen's booming voice said.
It would seem those exact words are a perfect description of Dark Angel and her sisters up above. So, you've a choice to make. Either you can continue to exclude some mechs based on your personal aesthetic biases about what makes an arena-worthy competitor, or you let the best pilots compete for the championship no matter what they're riding. Mind you, Comish, if you want to stick to your guns, this footage gets released to the Solaris Broadcasting Company.
The red lights faded, and Jansen's UrbanMech retreated down the tunnel, disappearing into the gloom. Matherwood sat in the dark, his heart pounding. The cabin, North Pier Solaris 7, Lyran Commonwealth, 4 August 3122. In one of the ramshackle bar's private back rooms, Jansen stood with Dermont, the SCPD's UrbanMech Corps pilots, and the members of the Zolaran Urby Derby Class 2 Pilots Association as they awaited the SBC evening newscast. The chrono clicked over to 1800, and the busts of SPC's news anchors rose from the corner projector.
Turn it up!
Someone yelled. The announcer, a former Miss Cathay, opened the broadcast.
Dear viewers, we are pleased to bring you a special announcement to explain the wild events of the past week that some have been calling the Great UrbanMech Uprising.
A montage of shaky footage rose above the projector, dozens of UrbanMechs emerging seemingly from nowhere to rampage through different neighborhoods of Solaris City, playing jump jet leapfrog with each other as they maneuvered through street-level traffic, unfurling "Let Them Fight" banners, and then, in unison, jetting to the rooftops and bounding away just before the SCPD officers could arrive on the scene.
It is still unknown who these mech pilots are.
The announcer continued.
An SCPD spokesperson stated that they are investigating, but there is no indication these renegade mechs had access to the city's tunnel network, and an audit of known urban mechs in the region shows them fully accounted for during the incursions.
Jansen raised his beer mug in toast to the SCPD officers present. To the brave police inspectors, may your funds clear escrow in a timely fashion. Raucous laughter drowned out the trivid, but then the image shifted to Chief Commissioner Matherwood, and Jansen hushed the crowd.
Thank you, BU. It's always a pleasure to come on your program.
Chief Commissioner, you told us earlier that you would have a formal statement on the renegade mechs. What can you tell us, and what will the Solaris Gaming Commission do about them?
Well, BU, the mandate of the Gaming Commission is to create an environment where the best pilots can rise through the ranks and create legends in the arenas, no matter their origins or equipment. Nobody expected Gray Naughton to get out of his first match alive in a rifleman, but today we still talk about Legend Killer in hushed tones. We cannot predict where the next legend of the games will come from. It could be a cutting-edge product of clan technology, or it could be the often disrespected UrbanMech. That is why I'm pleased to tell you and your viewers that the Great UrbanMech Uprising has been a special promotional campaign to raise awareness of the Commission's Equal Access Doctrine. Starting in the 3122 Grand Tournament, any pilot with the necessary qualifications may bring any equipment they like into the open class events without restriction.
Dermot slapped Jansen on the back. Rufus, you crazy Melfin maniac. I can't believe you got the commission to go along. Jansen grinned. All he's after is a good show, but he'd confused the outer shape with fighting spirit. We just reminded him that the pilot is the key, not the metal. That said, and I think Great-Grandpa Horvat would concur, dominating your foes in the unique melding of precision engineering and character that is an urban mech is the true measure of a champion. Dermot shook his head. You know, you and Dark Angel are going to be wiped out in the first round, right? You betting against me? I'm not that drunk, at least not yet. Then let's get to working on that. Gentlemen, to the uprising! The cheers bursting from the private room drew startled looks from the cabin's other patrons, not least for fear that the noise might drive the rickety structure into final collapse. This has been the Great UrbanMech Uprising, written by Eric Salzman, found in Shrapnel, the official BattleTech magazine, number 8. Make sure to check out Shrapnel for more amazing short fiction in the BattleTech universe.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. Continuing our series on the stories behind popular holodramas, Immortal Warrior is the most successful franchise in the Lyran Commonwealth, and extremely popular through most of the Inner Sphere. The original series was often derided as unrealistic and excessively violent, but what happens when an explosive story on the shimmering screen lands too close to real life? Today we'll take you through the unbelievable behind-the-scenes story of how an episode inspired by a mercenary raid led to controversy with the MRB, threats on actor Ricardo Hunt's life, and hasty reshoots starring the legendary bounty hunter themselves. This is The Sphere We Live In.
Secondary objective, rule check discovery segment. Initiating.
Today, we are doing something a little bit different because we have Constantin with us. Imagine for a moment that Hired Steel is not an animation, and is instead the play-by-play description of someone on the Classic BattleTech table. We are going to identify the rule mistakes those players made on the table, and we are going to see if Constantin can identify them, which should be fun because he doesn't really play Classic BattleTech. Yes, on the hot seat. We're all going to learn something fun here. Here's how this will work. I'm going to give Constantin an episode, a mech, and a hint, and we're going to see if he can guess the mistake. You'll be surprised about the things you can't do in Classic BattleTech when we identify these mistakes. These mistakes are based on the constraints of the Classic BattleTech system, rather than what the reality of that combat situation would actually look like. Okay, are you ready, Constantin?
Probably not, but as ready as I can. Yeah.
Episode 1. The person who was playing the Locust made a mistake regarding firing their machine guns. What mistake did they make?
They don't have a minimum range, do they?
They do not have a minimum range?
I mean, it would be... they are literally like the close quarters weapon. So you probably can't shoot while you are, in D&D terms, toppled or like on the floor. So I would lock that answer in. That it's like he can't shoot while he's on the ground.
That is very close. I'll give you half points. You can't fire both machine guns from a prone position.
What?
You can only actually fire one because he would have had to technically use his other arm in air quotations, to prop himself up. And right now, the low minimal arms design quirk that the Locust has doesn't impact his ability to prop himself up, which is a rule change actually that Keith Hahn and I have talked about that is likely going to happen in the future. So anyhow, he could only fire one of those machine guns.
That's actually funny because we have actually animated that when he gets face planted and has his leg shot off and impacts the dirt with the chin forward, basically. And the PGI locust or the locust in general has just these little stubby arm thingies, and he has to like rotate himself up with like his little short machine gun arm.
That's why Locust pilots are the most amazing pilots on the planet in the BattleTech universe, because they can actually somehow get themselves up with those little arms. Okay, the Locust pilot made another mistake. In episode 1, because he only existed in episode 1, he made a mistake regarding falling. What mistake did that pilot make regarding falling?
Oh, wow. These questions are not what I thought they would be. Probably have to edit out the thinking.
If you make thinking noises, we could keep it in. Just be like,
He made a mistake with like the falling action.
It's falling related. It's like falling lane. You fall in the game, something happens. It's all related.
Okay, yeah. Maybe it has to do something with like the fact that he's like turning around and on his back, but he lands on his face, but I don't know.
My God, another half a point. I'll give it to you. That's crazy. In BattleTech, classic BattleTech, a fallen mech is always face down.
Okay.
It can't lie on its back. So it falls down. Even if it lands on its back, it automatically rotates on its front side.
Okay.
So it would automatically rotate, and then it would use its stubby little arm to lift its other arm out to shoot. They functionally can't lie on their back in the game. I think if one of them would lie on their back on the classic BattleTech table, the board just spontaneously lights on fire, I guess. I don't know how it works.
They're one of those little wobbly toys. They always flip the other way.
Yeah, I play some online D&D with some old school friends. So I'm familiar with like at least some of the D&D rules. So I guess they are related.
So in episode 1, we also wrote down a few near misses. And these are things that some people that played classic BattleTech might say if they were making a quick judgment that this was a rule mistake. But actually, I think that how you set up the episode, it's not a rule mistake. These aren't questions, they're just more facts. First, it's the Shadowhawk had 2 near misses. So 1, when it jump jetted over the mech, it seemed that its walk speed increased. And generally that's not possible in the game unless he wasn't walking his full walk speed when he was moving up, or he had improved jump jets. If he had improved jump jets, he could have essentially sped up and increased his overall distance.
So if I can quickly interject, we always have the mechs walking a lot slower than they could, because we found that if you're playing the video game, you're pretty much always running at full speed, because why wouldn't you? It would be pretty stupid in a PvP game to not be as fast as possible. And if you are like reading the books or like you said, playing the game, you realize that they probably don't. And in the same notion as a tank in real life is not always driving at 80 kilometers per hour, because that's crazy.
Overall terrain, trying to return fire.
Exactly. I will
zooming along.
I will say that in my defense. However, my thinking was the jet engines are not related to the feet, because it's like literally a different kind of engine. So probably a real mistake then.
But you said the Shadowhawk wasn't walking at his max pace, right?
Yeah, no. They were actually still in the walk cycle compared to the run cycle.
Mm-hmm.
When you walk and then you start jogging, you start like you're doing these little jumps. So we have, for each mech, we have 2 different sets of animations, and they were still in the walk cycle phase. So I would say they were at like 30% speed.
There you go. So technically, if it had improved jump jets, which we wouldn't know because it could be installed, that technically was not a mistake. So let's imagine there's improved jump jets in there. Also, technically, the closest it could land to the Locust by the game is 31 meters, or else he would have had to declare a death from above attack. So because he looked closer to me than 31 meters, but you know what? I wasn't there on the battlefield. So let's imagine that he was exactly 31 meters away. And then it's a near miss.
again, from someone that was on the actual battlefield, he was probably one locust length away. That was very, very close. We intentionally did that because people were expecting us, because the pilot being Tex, that it would be a death from above, but we intentionally did not make it a death from above.
Very cool. All right, the Locust also had two things that could be considered a near miss. And this is once again to people that are looking at it really quickly. People might say that the leg shouldn't have blown off from a Rack 5, or the head or torso shouldn't have blown up from a Rack 5. But
technically, it was an Ultra Autocannon 5 that hit the head.
I said it was a Rack 5.
No, it's a Rack 5 on the Rifleman. Yeah.
No, but that took off the leg. But then the
one
on the Shadowhawk, that was an Ultra.
Okay, sorry. 5 damage regardless, excuse me. It was a damage grouping of 5. So people might say that shouldn't have blown up the Locust. But first, if you pay attention to Hired Steel, you'll notice that the Locust isn't in the best shape. For example, the internal console has duct tape on it. But second, even if the Locust wasn't in bad shape and was in perfect condition, that still could have happened via a floating critical that landed on the leg, could have blown off the leg or gone through and destroyed the engine. Completely possible by the rules, assuming you're playing with the advanced rules.
And I think it also gets hit by the laser shortly before.
Oh, it's not even a near miss. We'll call that a distant miss then. New category.
The bungle's on us again.
All right, back to the quizzes. Constantin, we've been too easy on you. Episode 2, the Hunchback player made a mistake regarding physical attacks. What mistake did they make?
Probably has to do something with the iconic hovercraft punching, but I'm not familiar with the close quarter rules for physical attacks.
I'll give you half a point again. You're just getting half a point all the way through. That's a passing grade. If you continue this, you're going to pass. You cannot punch or use claw attacks on vehicles because punch attacks can only be done to the level of what they're hitting. So level 2, which is the Hunchback would be standing at level 2. Yeah. He would have had to kick the mech. Yeah. Or kick the hover vehicle. Yeah. So you can't lean down and punch. Unfortunately,
the vehicle is a height 1, a mech is a height 2, and the punch can only hit at height 2, where the mech has its head at.
Yeah, this is a great example of a rule that makes perfect sense on a board game. Mm-hmm. But if you have something in a game or in a 3D space and they are standing, like, why wouldn't the punchback be able? Like,
why can't I? It's right there.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, you have 1.5 points so far, so you're doing pretty good. We're going to move. So technically, to pass, you need 2.5 points because there's 2 more questions.
Do you guys have, like, in Top Gear, have like a leaderboard of all your previous guests and see where they end up? That would be great.
Well, you're actually the only person we've quizzed like this, so you're going to be at the top and the bottom at the same time. So, yay! Leaderboard of 1. Okay, episode 3.
I have a fun, not a miss at all. Actually just something that's actually entirely accurate to the tabletop, which is when the Thunderbolt fires at the Rifleman and the Rifleman's pivoted away to, I don't know, return fire on some tanks or something, and then it looks forward just in time to take an autocannon right on the chin. That is in fact exactly how the rules work in tabletop, because torso twists let you make attacks in different directions, but they don't change the angle that you take damage from. You always return to neutral when you get shot.
And that's very nice of you.
I know you put that in there just for the hardcore tabletop nerds.
All right. Catapult mistake. It has to do with how the catapult was moving. Something the catapult did in their movement that technically is not passable in Classic BattleTech. Any idea?
Is it because of the crouching he did before he lets off the volley?
No.
That one's actually allowed via the hull down rules in the advanced rulebook.
It involves the vehicle. It's a movement vehicle interaction. That's a more clear hint.
Okay. Well, that was too nice of you because there's just one But it's then it's about the tank stomping. That it's probably not possible to step on a tank for whatever reason.
I'm going to give you 0.75 points out of 1. So that's close enough. Actually, no, I'll give you 1. That means if you mess one up, you can still pass. So that's 1 point. Pretty much. So you can't move through a tank with an attack. So what he would have to do is he'd have to go up to the tank, kick the tank, and then once the tank was destroyed, move through. Or he'd have to death from above the tank and then end his movement there and then move. So the fact that, and it's funny, I watched this frame by frame to see the exact position of the catapult's head. I'm like, is he actually walking through or is he attacking or what is it? And I concluded that he's walking through and stomping on him. So yeah, when he went into the hex, the movement would essentially stop and then he'd have to kick and then next round he'd have to start again. That's another weird limitation.
Ah, I see. But then that is something that is wrong in all of the MechWarrior games as well.
Oh yeah. All the MechWarrior games are wrong. Yeah,
for some reason on the tabletop, all the units have like a force field around them. They can't stand within 30 meters of each other for reasons.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how much stuff like makes sense on the classic BattleTech table, but doesn't make sense in the video games and vice versa. And this is like, an example. Yeah. Because I'm so used to vehicles doing, or you being able to stomp on vehicles in the video games and kill them. I always thought that you did more damage to vehicles with kicks, but you actually don't. So that's how the video games influenced my thinking as well. All right, let's go to a trebuchet. Oh wait, actually that means you technically passed, but we do have one more rule mistake. Let's do a near miss. The trebuchet, he fired missiles from far away, and arcing missiles, indirect LRM missiles, firing at the Shadowhawk at the end of episode 3. Technically, with the amount of tree coverage there, in classic BattleTech, he would need a spotter. So there could have been a spotter still on the field, completely reasonable. So that's one way to say that that's still possible. Or alternatively, if he had the special pilot ability Oblique Attacker, which is considered one of the most broken special pilot abilities in classic BattleTech, he wouldn't even need a spotter. He could just fire in directly for free. He just uses radar pings and shoots his missiles. It's a super cool ability. I love it. So that's a near miss.
So what was it? Is there a spotter in the field, or is the trebuchet an oblique attacker?
Yeah, I remember us talking about this because we have a similar situation in episode 4, just the other way around. I'm probably not spoiling anything when I say that they are fighting somebody in the base. So you need to have it work with the LRM lock. So in our case, we took a look at the scene and we concluded that the trebuchet had a direct line of sight when it came out of the hangar, enough to lock on. So they are fighting between these small little hills that the hover tanks came around in episode 2. They are fighting between these hills and the base in front of the opening, basically. And the trebuchet comes out of the hangar and then locks onto them and then moves into cover and shoots his alarms.
There you go. Look at that.
Once again, the bungle is us.
Well, I mean, it could have... Yeah, you're right. The bungle's us. But it's still... But the story is justified from behind the scenes. See? That's why it's a near miss.
You couldn't have known. You couldn't have known.
A near miss for Hired Steel, a bungle for BungleTech. Perfect. The last question. Note, you've already passed. So this is bonus. So if you get this, you're officially the smartest man alive. Or at least in Europe.
Great.
So, Michael, I'll have you ask this one because this is your specialty.
Yeah, this one might be a little bit hard even for a lot of BattleTech players. But specifically, it's around the SRM infantry and their brief appearance before they were quickly ended. Yes.
Any more hints, or just that's about them?
Yeah, I don't know that I can. They've only got 9 seconds before they get gunned down. So
yeah, I mean that is pretty realistic considering the state of infantry fighting nowadays. But so I remember the discussions, and I also remember the discussions now for episode 4 about shoulder launched weapons in BattleTech. Contrary to popular belief, we actually do think about this and try to make it work. But in the end, the movie always wins over some 50-year-old concept art or rule or whatever. And there was something with Inferno SRMs.
It doesn't have to do with the ammo type or anything. It has to do with what the infantry are doing.
Yeah, they were probably either too close or too far away from the catapult to actually shoot it. Or they couldn't have shot from cover or something like that because they were behind the rock.
Tabletop's actually pretty okay with that because they generally work at like a pretty big scale. But I looked at these and I said, those are SRM infantry because they're using a short range missile. Those are counted as like a crude weapon. So their speed is actually 0. And they can only move 1 square at a time if they don't fire. So the rule mistake is they couldn't have shot that and then immediately started trying to escape. They would need to shoot and then, deconstruct their shoulder-mounted rocket launchers or something.
Okay.
That's just how the rules work.
Yeah, like I said, it makes total sense. But if you're looking at a war movie like an infantry with an RPG, they are not stationary.
Yeah,
and they definitely shouldn't be.
It sort of feels like that's a rule that came from sort of like a much older view of warfare, written in the 80s and stuff for how these things worked. And now warfare has changed quite a lot from what they would have built this on. So
that or playtesting and cheesy strategies. I can still remember like Company of Heroes 2, these real-time strategy games, where literally the best strategy that you could do is just a lot of soldiers with bazookas. Because they just nuke any tank immediately because they are shooting like 10 or 12 rockets and then immediately run away. So
awesome. Well, I've got your grade for you. I'm going to count the infantry question as a bonus question because really this is about BattleTech. So you scored 63%, which in Canada is an A+. So you're officially top of the leaderboards. And we don't talk about the bottom of the leaderboards. But we don't go there. So A+ Canadian grade. I'll mail you your master's certificate after this session.
You're certified to play BattleTech Classic.
Yeah, I'll probably still get my ass kicked. Yeah.
Hey man, that's my experience playing Classic BattleTech in general. It's not winning, it's about the journey to the death. That's what I enjoy the most. Yeah, so this has been super fun. So obviously, these are just inconsistencies between Classic BattleTech and the animation. Obviously, the animation didn't do anything wrong. That's just a different medium. And Classic BattleTech has some weird limitations, and it took us a while to find these. I watched the video multiple times over, and I was like, is this actually possible? What about this? What about that? And it's funny, the locust shooting from the ground, for example, I remember getting in a conversation about this, and how can your stalker prop itself up and shoot from the ground with low minimal arms? Yep, that shouldn't be possible, but it is possible. It just rolls on one arm. So I'm just visualizing the locust doing it and now trying to visualize you trying to animate that obscure weirdness of this face down locust leaning on one shoulder, still face down, like bending his back upwards. Oh man, talking about looking comical. Like with the old models, imagine how crazy that would look like in animation. It would just look wacky.
But instead we got like one of my favorite shots. The camera on the locust as it pivots its upper torso over. I love that shot.
I just wish the locust won. But that's in for the director's cut, I'm sure that will come out eventually, right? Yeah.
That's what you're hinting at for episode 4, right? The locust comes back.
Yeah, exactly. Just a lot bigger legs, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man,
that's the legs at the end of episode 3.
That idea is even better. How to make a locust stronger? Just give it Atlas legs.
Make it very slow.
Because the legs are its vulnerability. Clearly. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for bearing with us. This has been super, super fun and really interesting. You are a good man, and your patience is appreciated, both in your creative endeavors and your putting up with our strange quiz here, which once again you got an A+ on, Canada standard.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like I said, I really appreciate all of the preparation going into this, and your viewers should know that this is not a usual amount of preparation that these guys are doing. Very much appreciated. It's been very fun. I could sit here for 2 more hours.
Don't tempt me. And that brings us to an end of another deployment of BungleTech. A quick reminder before we wrap up that you have until April 7th to submit your reviews for our Review Remembrance episode. Get those text reviews in soon on the podcast platform of your choice. Or send us an email to bungletech@outlook.com. We've already got some fun reviews we are stoked to discuss. Remember, you can find us via Discord, email, Twitter, and Patreon. All linked in the description. As we wrap up today, allow me in closing to share some words of wisdom from Patron technician Klint. Out of ammo? Weapons destroyed? No problem. You've got the mass. Charge that mech into the enemy. Until next time, MechWarriors. Good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.